Welcome, everybody, to the Weekly Grind Podcast. I am your host, Keith Fabbri, with my co-host tonight, Tommy Styles, and the 2012 IFBB North American Lightweight Champion, Doctortoddlee. Guys, how are we doing?
I'm good, Keith.
Awesome.
All right.
Me and Tommy always wait for each other. We both say at the exact same time.
Right.
I'm just gonna go first from now on.
Yeah, there you
go. Do it, man.
Guys, it's episode number 25. We're doing Anabolic U Part 3. We're going to talk tonight about insulin and human growth hormone and IGF-1 because our first two topics that we had on our Anabolic U Part 1 and Part 2 went into just plain anabolic and androgenic steroids. And then the second part was about aromatase inhibitors, clenbuterol, DNP, T3, and any other ancillaries that went along with that. So now we're going to move it on to some of the peptide stuff and the growth hormone, and we'll go to that, some of that stuff. Our next one, actually, we're going to have in a couple weeks is going to be in Part 4, and that's going to be on high dose gear. So since we talked mostly what your basic dosing would be for some of this stuff, we're going to go into the high dose stuff on the next one after this. So with that, guys, Tommy and I don't know if Tommy, if you knew him, but I know Todd, you knew him really well. We lost one of our brothers in iron here last week at the end of the week before the weekend. Joe Leahy, Iron Joe, passed away on Friday night. He was the 2009 Junior Michigan champion. He won probably about 8 or 9 overalls that I know of. He's been competing for a long time. He coached guys. He was in and around the sport here in the state of Michigan. He was in magazines, videos, you name it. He passed away on Friday. Todd, did you want to say anything about Joe?
Well, he was my first coach, and if anyone's ever worked with me and they're like, God damn it, this guy's a dick, Joe's why. That basically,
yeah.
But it's like the concept of the holding hands and singing Kumbaya and everyone needs a coach. And you've got a puffs with aloe for everyone's tier coaching style, just enables people to be weak and needy. Whereas Joe's style was to get in your head and make you powerful enough to actually achieve a goal. That he could motivate you without pampering you and stroking you and hand-holding you. And it's really changed who I was because I was some soft-handed doctor who would do surgeries and shit, and that's the most difficult thing I've ever done, which is really physically taxing, honestly, to sit there for that long and work. But to actually have someone who was a drill sergeant for Marines and a corrections officer driving you through a diet protocol completely changed who I was and completely helped me become the man that I am today. And it's most little boys are raised to be like little girls today. And unlike Tommy and unlike Keith, and probably unlike Phil, that they're just really needy and weak. And that being able to take the stuff that Joe taught me and give it to people, they might hate my guts, but in a year or two, they'll love me for it because every way that they interact with the rest of their life changes. Right. And what they go into bodybuilding and they go into steroids so that they can have self-esteem. It's like injecting yourself full of male hormones doesn't make you a man. That you still are a whiny bitch. And if you feel like you need to take drugs to be a man, it's not going to work. That comes from within. And it comes from self-esteem and confidence from achieving goals. So all that stuff is shit that I learned from Joe. Now, he wasn't articulate like that. He approached it differently. But this was the hardest working, badass motherfucker I've ever seen. That he will have a broken arm and be doing cardio and legs. Nothing ever stopped him. 2 to 3 hours a day, twice a day. Just this old school mentality of using almost no science, just hard work, force of will, and perseverance to achieve any goal. And there was a period of time where if there was a show at any time, he could show up and win the overall. That he was in shape all year round for years straight. Yeah. And he was like this shadow of death over the whole state of Michigan. Yep. So no matter what you prep for, if he showed up, people are going to be crying in their Wheaties because they just lost.
Right.
And it's a huge loss to lose this guy. And it's just unfortunate there anyone out there that never got to meet him and never got to be inspired by him.
Rest in peace, Joe. All right, guys, with that, our guest tonight is contest prep coach and national level bodybuilder, Phil Viz. Phil, welcome to the Weekly Grind podcast.
What's going on, guys? How are you?
We're good. We are great.
How you doing?
All right, Phil, got you on here tonight talking Anabolic U Part 3, growth hormone, insulin, IGF-1. Give us a little bit of background on you and who you are, and then we'll get into this thing.
Well, I've been educating myself for a pretty long time. I've been in this field for a while. I coach, pros, national level bodybuilders, regional guys. I even started taking on normal people, trying to find that they're actually easier to deal with than my bodybuilders. But and some of them are tougher too. But I've also competed nationally. I've placed inside the top 10 about 5 or 6 times, inside the top 5 3 times. So been nipping away at the heels of a pro card. Didn't quite get one yet. Not going to be competing this year, focusing more on my business and what I got to do. I'm a little bit busier and I have some higher profile clients this year that I really got to tend to and make sure things are done right. But, I'm happy to be here and help educate everybody. And this is one of the topics that, I'm most well versed with because GH and insulin has made one of the biggest physique changes in myself and allowed me to advance. Right. And I believe it's a major player in cracking sticking points and breaking genetic set points and really, I guess, just defeating what your genetics normally would allow. So I got really good with these things and, happy to talk about it. So we're going to go in that direction. Awesome.
And that's kind of why I had you on, because I know this is a topic that you usually have a lot to say about. So with that, we'll get into this thing. Let's start with growth hormone. We'll start with that one first, and let's talk about off-season protocols for growth hormone. What is a normal amount of growth hormone that you would have for somebody who's a first timer of using?
Well, before we go into that, I wanted to just discuss, a lot of people like to use generic GH or pharma grade GH. And, at this current point in time, I don't believe that our research or just our capabilities, our analytical capabilities are able to decipher the difference, with everything that they do. We have seen that generics will elevate IGF, but then we know GHRPs and things like that can do it too. Sure. So, we don't necessarily know, factually that they're different, but anybody who is trial and error, just tried them throughout, their career and whatever they were doing, everybody knows that they're distinctly different. I've even tried to convince myself twice that the generics were the same because I wanted to save money and I didn't have a lot of money back when I started doing it. So, I remember I switched over to pharma grade and a friend had given me a couple for my birthday and I decided to try it and it worked really well. Did a few there. And then, I decided to try to bounce back to the generics. I'm like, you know what? There's not much of a difference. You kind of convince yourself, mind fuck yourself when you really want to believe something. I'm like, listen, I don't have a lot of money. So, and listen, I understand where everybody who's pumping generics are coming from because they don't have a lot of money and they can't afford the pharma. So they really, really, truly want to believe it's the same, Sure. And I've been there, I didn't have a lot of money and I couldn't use, big doses. So I wanted to believe that generics were the same. So then I went back to the generics and I'm getting results again and I'm like, it's the same, but then it's kind of like in the back of my head that it's kind of not. And then I decided to get ready for the USA that year and I'm like, screw it, let me just spend the money on pharma. And I did. And again, night and day fucking difference. Sure. Your fingernails grow faster, hair grows faster, skin looks better. Even nagging injuries seem to go away. Yep. And, it's just, you get the false fullness that you get from it. And just your metabolic rate, the fact that you can fucking eat whatever the fuck you want and get lean on it, it's kind of, I kind of had to just accept it that, listen, it's not the fucking same. No. No. And listen, a lot of people use the argument, they're like, oh, well, the testing and this and this and that. And I'm like, listen, every single pro and top amateur can't be wrong. You think we all just like wasting money and that you guys, that you amateur lower level guys are just that much smarter than all of us and and we're delusional? Trust me, everybody has tried it. Everybody has tried the generics and tried to believe. We're not fucking spending $300 more for a kit because, because we want to.
Right.
You know?
No. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, with anything else, the price that you pay for something is generally going to tell you the quality of it. If it's a product or a service, I mean, you're going to pay for the quality that you get. The pharma grade, there's no comparison between the two, the generic and the pharma. Now, will the generic work for you if that's all you can afford? Yeah, it'll work for you. It's just not going to work as well as the pharma grade will. It's going to be, like you said, a night and day difference.
Yeah, and then you got people that are like, again, that goes for gear too. You got people that are, selling gear and buying gear and this and that. And somebody's telling me, I get bottles of gear for $20 or something like that. And I'm like, dude, the person who's making it has to order these raws, spend all this money, take these chances, get it through customs, buy all the solvents and materials. You think they're going to take a $5 profit with all that risk? You're out of your mind.
Right.
It's either it's fucking underdosed is what it is.
Oh yeah.
So people like to they like to think that they're special, and they like to think that they stumbled upon some kind of deal that nobody else has, or they think they like to know something that somebody else doesn't. It's like, dude, listen, if I'm selling you a Rolex for $500, it's not a fucking Rolex.
Or it's stolen.
Or it's stolen, yeah.
Right.
But listen, odds are it's not a fucking Rolex. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Probably is, yeah. So off season, let's say what you get somebody that comes to you that wants to do some growth hormone. They've never done growth hormone before. Let's assume that it's pharma grade growth hormone.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And with my clients, they ask me if they can start on generics and go to pharma, and I tell them no. I'd rather you run zero and put that money in a fucking jar. And when you have the money, we'll get
the pharma grade and do it right. Yeah.
I'd rather do zero and save that money for when we can do pharma, because pharma is going to crack a sticking point. I'm telling you right now, it's going to crack a sticking point. I don't know anybody who's gotten on pharma growth and not taken a couple steps forward immediately.
Well, the thing with the difference between the two is, I mean, you can get really good results from the generic and stuff, but you're usually running double doses. So why wouldn't you just take that fucking money and spend it on the pharma grade, and I have to do huge doses?
I don't even think it's the same drug.
It might not be.
I don't think 15 I use a generic is going to compare to 4 I use a pharma. It's not.
No.
I've used them both over and over and over. And one of the things that I actually ran into this past year is when I actually decided, I said, fuck it, and I ran my GH really high.
Yeah.
Is I started to get a little bit of a GH cut and distension.
Sure.
And thankfully I was able to reverse that because, time ran out and the contest came, so I didn't have a chance to run it high for long. And, it didn't set in, so I'm like, fucking thank God, because my waistline is what makes my physique. And I thought my career was over, I thought I blew my waistline out and I was done. So what was that?
When you said it was high, what dose were you running that you actually crossed that threshold into too far?
I got up to 12 to 14.
Whew.
Of pharma grade.
Of pharma grade, yes, sir.
That's okay. I have never heard of that.
Were you
never heard
dose, was that dose split, or were you doing that all
I split it up, and you've never heard 12 to 14? I've heard 30.
Not of generic, sure, but I've never heard of someone.
No. There's a few pros right now running up 20 to 30.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm not going to drop people's names, but there are.
Yeah.
They must have hot rich girlfriends, because I don't know how you can afford that much.
Honestly, I'm going to be straight up with you. The majority of the Olympians are running decent dose GH. They're not running fucking 4 IUs.
No.
Only one of them that I know of is running low dose, and it's because he's afraid he's going to ruin his waistline.
I've seen and I've heard of +8, somewhere up to around 12. 20, I've heard a few that are doing that. 30, that's a huge amount of pharma grade.
Take a ride out to Kuwait.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've firsthand knowledge of all the stories and stuff, or what happened out there.
So do I.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're banging GH out there and insulin.
Yeah.
See, the thing about that is people like to run high dose insulin, but when you run high dose insulin, you run into the issue of high body fat, and then your sensitivity gets fucked.
Yep.
Your partitioning shifts, and then you're not growing as well. Yep. But if you throw in high dose GH, keeps you lean.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that it allows you to abuse insulin.
Right.
So, but you just got to be, like I said, you got to be careful of that waistline, and some people are more sensitive than others, and I have always been sensitive to every drug. I I'm sensitive to alcohol. I can't run high-dose steroids. I've tried. It's not a moral thing, and believe me, I would love to run higher than I have. Listen, I'm by no means low. Like, I've run my favorite off-season is about 1,500 tests and about 800 EQ.
Right.
But that's a national level cycle for somebody who doesn't have that good of genetics.
Right.
And honestly, I probably would have gone higher if I didn't get sick.
Right.
You know, I get flu symptoms above that, and I've run as much as I would say 150 to 175 train average of the day.
Woohoo!
That's not. You think that's high?
For me, that's high. I can't. I'm sensitive to it. I can't do that much. No, I know it's not. I know it's not high, but for me, that would be That would be high.
I'm not going to drag anybody's name through the mud, but I know that there's ex-Olympians and current Olympians running over a gram up to 2.
Of tren?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Honestly, Phil, this is the first I've heard of any of this. I've heard rumors like that, but never anyone who spoke with any certainty. I thought that would just be ludicrous.
How do you fucking?
Yeah.
I could probably name 20 friends off the top of my head that have run a gram of tren.
Right.
So to me, that just means these people aren't sensitive to it.
It just means that they're resistant to the side effects. See,
right.
A lot of times,
exactly.
A lot of times with the bigger pros and bigger, more advanced athletes, it's simply their genetic ability to be resistant to the side effects, because they can run higher doses and get away with it, whereas other people can't. I tried to push my tren up to 200 every other day at one point in contest prep, and I still remember at LA Fitness going to do back pull downs, and I couldn't breathe on the warm up.
Right.
Like, I couldn't catch my breath. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with me? And I realized it was the tren, and I pulled it down, and it was still a good couple weeks before I could breathe again. And I was getting horrible night sweats, and I had horrible anxiety, and I couldn't sleep, and I was I'm real sensitive, so I was all fucked up. Believe me. One of my favorite things to do at national level guys is 100 mgs of tren a day, which is about 700 a week.
Yeah.
Towards the end, I taper it up, but that's at the end. There's people that'll run a gram straight through prep 12 weeks.
No, that's.
But,
I'll do that the last 10 days. I'll do 100 tren a day for the last 10 days. But I want to kill people while I'm driving. Like vehicular homicide's my middle name.
Fact of the matter is, I would look better on that, and it does, and it would work better. But can you handle the side effects?
No,
if I can't lift and I can't operate, then it's not going to work.
No.
And if it affects my health, then I'm not going to peak. People don't take into consideration that they do different things like stretching their organs and kidney damage, and then they blame their peak on what they do with their water and what they do with the drugs, and they took too many diuretics, and they don't consider the fact that their kidneys just weren't fucking functioning and they couldn't dry out.
Right.
Or their liver, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you stress your liver, you're not going to burn body fat at the same rate. You're pounding orals, and then you can't get lean, and you're thinking it's your fucking diet and your cardio and your fucking fat burners. Hey, maybe your fucking organs aren't functioning. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, the things that we take just make our bodies work a certain way, but our body still does the work.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm saying? So if our workers are fucking sick, then they're not going to do as good a job of work.
No.
If the sword's too heavy, you can't swing it.
Right.
Exactly. So people don't consider all of these things. But back to the topic with the GH. If I'm starting somebody off and they've never used it before, I usually start at about 4 or 6, pending their level. Are they local level? Are they regional level? Are they doing this for fun? Are they going national level? Or are we just going for broke? We want a pro card and they have the genetics to do it. Because I won't blast somebody if they come to me and they want to say, like, I want to be pro, I want to get to the Olympia stage, but I feel like they can't. I'm going to be honest with them. You can't do it, And I'm not going to push drugs on you, and make you unhealthy, and you're just going to figure out that I'm right, 5 years down the line.
Right.
But I will push it to people that I think have the potential to do that. Within reason. So I would start with about 4 to 6. If it's off season, I like to do a bolus dose pre-workout, simply because you get that false fullness and it helps a little bit. And we want IGF levels elevated around the workout, around the most crucial times, and it helps uptake and everything else. So I look at it like a performance enhancer. Which time of day is it going to help me the most, right? So if it's going to help me enhance my workout performance, by creating a little bit more fullness, more leverage in the muscle, allow me to lift harder, right? That's when I want to do it. And then my IGF levels are elevated for post-workout when recovery is necessary. So that's going to be the most crucial time. So instead of spacing it out and having blood levels level, go ahead.
Are you talking? So if it's pre-workout, This question I've had for a while. Are we talking IM or sub Q then?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think it matters that much. IM is going to have a little bit more absorption. I like to do sub-Q just because I don't.
I've always done growth and insulin IM. I've never done anyone's either sub Q. So
I do it sub-Q.
Sub-Q is just slower.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's just slower.
Sub-Q is going to be a little bit slower, yes, absolutely. But, I just don't like all of that stress response to my muscles. You think about how often you're injecting and how much you're injecting. It just inches that up to miles, and I'd like to reduce that as much as I possibly can so you're going to have less trauma injecting sub-Q versus intramuscular. And then you got the people that are doing IV, for even more uptake. And I remember one of the guys that was, more respected on one of the forums I was on back in the day was just jumped in and made a great point. And he's like, listen, if you jerk-offs are so worried about uptake that you're gonna try to get a little bit extra out of shooting intramuscular, why don't you just fucking work a few more hours at your job and fucking add another IU?
Right.
Instead of risking collapsing your veins.
Right, exactly.
So rather than doing 1 unit every 4 hours, 4 times a day, you do all 4 units right before you lift, or 30 minutes before you lift, or how exactly do you do
Yes,
this?
sir. 30 minutes before you lift, because you got to think about it. What are your IGF levels going to do, and what type of effect is it going to have?
30 minutes after the GH is when the IGF goes up, correct?
Yes, absolutely. But what happens is, it starts to go up, but you have a period of time it continues to happen. But you got to figure: do I want stable level blood levels, throughout the day when it's not as crucial, or do I want elevated levels at the most crucial time? Say
you have more blood flow to the organs the other times a day, so you get more organ growth. If you spike it when you need it going to the muscle, you get more muscle growth.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So that makes IGF-1 DES preferable to LR3 for that same reason.
Absolutely.
Not that you're
And DES, I like pre-workout as well because of those effects, and I don't like LR3 at all, and you'll never see me use it.
I don't like LR3 either.
The next concern I would have is, unless you're doing the DES 5 minutes pre. In other words, if I shot my DES with my GH, I would think the DES would blunt the GH's IGF-1 production.
Well,
it's already present.
Yes, but what you have to understand is it's not an endogenous process that's happening. It's stimulated exogenously. So what happens is you're creating a chemical response. You're not looking for a natural.
Okay. So you're saying because you got such an overloaded GH that's synthetic, your liver can't help but produce the IGF, even though the IGF's present. Okay.
Yes, you're forcing a response.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
Like people will say things like metformin lowers your IGF levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why would we worry about that when we're taking 8 IUs of growth? Which one do you think is going to win?
Not the metformin.
You see what I'm saying? It would do that to your natural levels, sure. But if you're taking a bolus dose of an exogenous drug that's meant to stimulate a process, you're not going to stop that process from happening. And that's the same concept of people taking insulin. They think the same thing because it elevates IGF levels and increases IGF-BP3, which extends the half-life of IGF, which is why it has a synergistic effect with the GH. But you're not going to stop that process from happening. However, I do like to space them if I'm going to use them together. I will let the GH do its work and then use the DES to allow the effects to compound. Wouldn't that be the best idea?
Right.
Yeah. So what I do is I do GH, usually 1 to 3 units, and then I do 2 to 3 units of insulin, 1 unit for every 10 carbs I'm going to have. Then 30 minutes later, after I've done my heavy work, after I've stimulated the MGF that would normally occur from muscle destruction from sets of 6, before I start my hypertrophy work, I go to the bathroom and I do my IGF-1 DES, do about 100 micrograms, because I assume that the GH and the insulin has already caused the natural amount to come out. And then now is when I'm going to be getting the pump sets. And the MGF's already been produced.
That's another thing about the sequence in which you take these drugs, because taking growth hormone is going to elevate MGF first, right? So it's going to induce production of MGF, which is responsible for proliferation, which is cell division, right? So once we have that process, now we have a bunch of immature cells, and we know that the IGF is what supports differentiation, which is the maturization, and basically maturing these newly immature cells into fully functional cells that basically are that accomplish a specific task. So you need both processes to happen.
Right. So in other words, for simplicity, GH leads to MGF, MGF goes to hyperplasia, GH and insulin go to IGF, IGF goes to hypertrophy. That's basically
exactly.
Okay.
But GH does both. It does it sequentially, so it will do both.
Right.
So what you want is you want to allow the MGF to happen, right?
Correct.
And then you want to support the IGF. See, insulin increases IGF BP3, which allows the IGF to extend its half-life and become more effective for a period of time. So those have a synergistic effect. However, we want to let the MGF happen first, right? So exactly.
So what I'm hearing is do the insulin with the IGF-1, not with the GH. Is that what I'm hearing?
Uh-huh.
Okay, good. And also there's a 40% binding homology for the receptor sites. So half your IGF-1 is being wasted binding to insulin unless you actually use the cheaper insulin to mop up those receptor sites first anyway.
Yes, that is correct. And also what we have to realize is, there's a point at which we pay for trying to elevate IGF too much. Because once receptors are saturated, it's going to go elsewhere. Right. And where else do we have a high concentration of IGF receptors on our intestinal film?
And spleen too.
Yes.
Spleen.
So you're going to start to cause growth of your intestines.
Correct.
By having too much excess IGF-1 for too long periods of time. And that's another reason why I don't like to sustain it. I want in and out.
Right. So you don't like LR3.
No, that's another reason why I don't like LR3.
Yeah,
but there's another reason why I don't like elevated GH doses throughout the day. Because if you're going to sustain that, eventually, you're going to end up with organ growth. That's going to happen.
Right.
So I prefer to bolus dose it pre-workout, get it in and out.
What if you were using a lot more, like say if you were using 8 to 12 IUs, would you still use all 8 to 12 pre-workout, or would you then maybe space some of it out?
Well, you've got to consider this. It depends on the person.
Sure.
It depends on when they're lifting, what they're doing.
Yep.
If I have somebody who's an early riser who trains early in the morning, well, then there's not that big of a deal breaking up the doses because I'm going to get a little boost from my morning dose, right?
Yep.
And then I'm going to probably eat a meal or two, and then I'm going to do another dose, which is going to compound on the initial dose. So there's no harm in breaking those up, and you're going to get a little bit of fat loss as well.
Sure.
Doing the morning dose, right? Especially if you do it pre-cardio, so you're going to get to take advantage of some of the effects with that too. Whereas if the person trains later in the day, you're not going to get so much compounding going on. So I would say bolus later in the day, maybe do a little bit in the morning, and then I would maybe do some at night before bed, because your body releases its largest pulses while sleeping. So that's when it's trained to utilize it for recovery as well.
Right.
And
well, while we're on that subject, what I've always done is, and I had people do, is MK677, just any secretagogue would work. But it only works to secrete the pulse from the pituitary in the absence of insulin. So in other words, before bed, in the middle of the night, and first thing in the morning is when your insulin levels are the lowest. So you can save money on GH by using a secretagogue at those 3 time periods. So if you're going to be doing fasted cardio, or at least have eggs and MCT oil, but no carbs before your cardio, and a secretagogue might work as well rather than just using the expensive GH, because you can still get some production of your own. Or do you feel that it's so weak to use secretagogues it's not even worth trying?
Oh, I love using MK677, and I don't necessarily always use it for its GH effects. I use it more so for appetite because it helps people eat a little more.
Right.
And that's just a completely other topic as far as appetite and absorption and intake and uptake of food. I believe the fact that you're hungry, increases your assimilation rates and efficiency. But like you said, insulin levels have to be low. Hence why I don't like to include carbs with the last meal a lot whenever I use MK677. But you got to also realize you're going to get a little bit of insulin resistance with that. Your blood sugars are going to start waking up with a little bit higher blood sugar, right? So if you're doing more cardio, it's going to take more effort to get that blood sugar down into a fat burning zone. So you got to be careful when you use it, why you use it, and how it affects the other things. You've got to be aware of all variables that regarding every drug in relation to everything else that you're doing. So a lot of people don't miss these things, and they don't take these things into consideration when they're all major factors. But
well, don't you consider that the insulin sensitivity from the MK677 is due to its GH, or do you think that the MK? Oh, okay. Okay, so and this is what I said to someone. I'm like, it can't not produce GH if you're bitching that it decreases your insulin sensitivity.
Yeah, like, it absolutely does. I'm just saying, I value its appetite stimulating properties more.
Okay.
Right.
Because you would rather spend the money on real GH.
I would rather spend the money on GH, but MK is my go-to. So, like I said, if I have people that can't afford pharma grade GH, and I tell them don't waste their money on generics, I will put them on the MK.
Okay.
Okay, cool. That's exactly what I've been doing. Sweet.
Okay.
Good enough.
So if people don't want to spend the money on pharma, it doesn't necessarily mean you don't have money if you don't spend the money on pharma grade. It just means
it's a lot of money.
It just means other priorities. Listen, if you have kids, if you have a family, a mortgage, it's kind of hard to take food out of their mouth and spend it on GH unless you have a lot of excess money,
Right.
I mean, a tiny Lego thing is $15, so your kids will have no fucking toys if you buy GH.
No, I'm just saying.
No, I'm serious.
No, you're serious.
I could buy the kids birthday presents, or I could buy a kid a GH. Fucked up. No, but I ended up buying birthday presents anyway and got cheap GH. But it's that situation. It's like, for fuck's sake, this Punisher action figure is $20. This lightsaber's $35. What happened? How did these get so expensive?
Your kids have some cool toys. I love Star Wars.
All right. So you're using GH in the off season. Is there a time period that you will run it that say is the minimum amount of time that you will run growth hormone with somebody in the off season, or is it something you just leave it in all the time?
Are you going to ask me to release all my tricks?
Hey, you tell me. You tell me whatever you want.
I'll ask a better question. Do you
advise? That's fine. No. Listen. That's fine. I'll answer.
Because I know some people will want to run it. They'll try to run it, for like 12 weeks only, and then come off of it. Some people just like to leave the shit in all the time and just run it continuously.
Every listener you have is about to run and try this. By the way.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Okay.
What I found is that you can do blast doses of GH for plateau breakers, or even just take a big jump forward. A lot of people think that it's a slow trickling long-term effect. However, I've found that you can, I figured, releasing this, people are going to get a hold of your programs nowadays anyway.
Sure.
So people are going to find this trick out eventually anyway. So, but I've been doing this for the last year with specific people, especially people that are hard gainers that can't seem to make big jumps, and I found that this does help make big jumps. You can do bolus doses of GH for short periods of time combined with insulin, kind of like the way they do it in Kuwait.
Yep.
They do it long term though, and I don't like to do that because you have adverse health effects and sensitivity issues and this and that.
Yeah, they're not worried about that over there.
And I refuse to compromise somebody's health to that point.
Right.
But I will do spurts of it. I will do 6 to 8 weeks. And people think they're going to spend more money. And I say, no, you're not going to spend more money. We're just going to take the GH that you're going to use for over a 4-month period, and we're going to use it in 1.5. And then I'll take you off the GH and use MK.
Okay.
So you're not going to spend more money. You're just going to spend the same amount of money. We're just going to condense it. But I like to do somewhere between 8 and 10, 5 days a week, blasting insulin. And for people that tend to be skinny and just have a tendency to have a hard time storing, because if you look at an ectomorph that has a hard time really storing anything in their muscles, they tend to burn up everything as energy instead.
Yep.
You kind of force storage, but you don't want to increase body fat because then it shifts sensitivity partitioning like we discussed, and it starts working against you. But if you run high GH and sometimes a low dose of T3 for nutrient turnover, because you're going to be eating a lot of food, you can get away with, blasting the shit out of insulin, and you will make some fucking jumps in growth. Listen, I'm not going to say it's fucking magic. You're not going to turn into Phil Heath overnight.
No.
But you probably will get 10, 12, 15 pounds over, a 6-week, 8-week period. And then what I usually do with them is I work to maintain that weight we have attained. Say if we're 240 and we shoot up to 255 and I said take them off it, and I'm like, all right, now our goal is to make this a good 255, better than it looks right now. So you've got 2 months to hold this 255 and make it a real 255, holding the weight.
Sure.
So little tricks like that. And listen, that's the basics of it.
Right. Now you could do the same thing. Would you need
person, and so does the food.
Would you need to use
Can I repeat
insulin?
that again to make sure I understood correctly and simplify it? So let's say Joe Schmo and the ectomorph hits a plateau. He can't gain size.
Yep.
You could blast 8 to 10 units of GH for, I think you said 5 days? Or did you say 5 days a week?
5 days a week for 6 weeks.
For 6 weeks.
For 6 weeks. And then he gets this new body weight, but to hold that body weight, after that 6 to 8 weeks, we're switching to MK677,
for the rest
and
of
it solidifies those gains. Is that
Yep.
what you basically just said? This is what me and Keith talked to Justin Compton about, that if he went and had this off-season rebound and then went right into another contest, he would lose that muscle. But if he took 9 months between shows, he could hang on to that muscle.
Yes, absolutely. It's new muscle.
It's the same thing. Yeah. New muscles are usually always the first muscle to go is when you diet.
Yeah, new muscle falls off real easy. So, I used to, when I was newer at coaching, try to push the body weight up right before prep.
Right.
But I found that it would just fall off. So what I've done now is I'm big on planning ahead. People that sign up with me, everybody will tell you that's ever signed up with me, I won't send 1 month at a time. I always send 3 months at a time because I use one phase and set up for the next. There's no way you're going to be as efficient if you're not planning ahead.
Right.
So I always prime their body for the next phase.
The next one.
So I make sure I set up for that. So now what I like to do is I do the blast a little early, and then I try to solidify and own that weight before prep starts.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
No, yeah.
That makes sense. That's pretty much what I did too.
Because also it didn't coincide with the way that I like to start preps a lot. I like to start preps blasting out of the gate to elevate sensitivity and get a nice spike of body fat loss while you're most sensitive and get ahead. And then I pull down the intensity a little bit, bring the cardio down a little bit, increase the food a little bit. And then we stabilize right there and move into prep, a little bit ahead,
God, that's exactly what I did this time too.
And
that's
that process will tear down new muscle. So that's why I don't like to push right before prep. I'll push 2 months before prep, and then I'll spend like 4 to 6 weeks really trying to hold that weight, or longer if time allows, and then try to come into prep with something that I've already maintained, and then I find the scale doesn't drop as hard.
Okay. Makes sense.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I did almost the same thing. I put on a bunch of muscle, maybe 10, 15 pounds. Then I just coasted to hold on to it for about 4 or 5 months. And then Keith had told me he completely came off everything and just used the Thor's Hammer product. And it worked. It kept his size and strength. And then my buddy Logan did it, and I was like, I make the shit. I invented it. It's been 2 years. I've never actually tried it the way I tell people it works. So I'm a fucking hypocrite. So I come off, and I kept lifting heavy as fuck. And for like 3 to 5 weeks, I actually kept everything on nothing. Like I wasn't running shit. I was running like 1 unit of generic GH. And I was running Thor's Hammer. And then once I started losing a little bit of strength, I immediately went back on and started my prep. Kind of blasted, like you said, was able to hang on to the mass, got down. I just got my body fat tested today. It was 8.2%. I'm 10 weeks out. Now I'm easing up on the cardio. I'm increasing my carbs by 50 a day.
Exactly.
And I'm actually stronger than I've ever been before. I just did 5 PRs last week.
And your fullness probably shot through the roof in the last 10 days, didn't it?
Of course.
Yeah, completely. As soon as I started lifting 455 on squats and 315 on a bench in a Smith, because I don't have a spotter, but still, that's a lot of weight from me. I'm 180 pounds. I just started storing water intramuscularly and carbs intramuscularly like crazy.
Exactly. So not only did you get ahead with your body fat, you got ahead with the responses that you want from your body as far as sensitivity, fat burning, and everything else. So you're essentially just ahead of the game in every which way. And, that was a very smart approach. That was a calculated approach that you made, basically due to a careful analysis and thought process. And, my dad used to always tell me when I was younger, great minds think alike. And it's so funny.
Thanks, Phil.
Well, no, I know. Well, my point to that is, I always joke around with my friends. I joked around with John Meadows, my friends Jason Theobald and such. And it's funny. We always tend to agree on everything.
Right.
And the funny thing is, I say, people that are smart and usually come to the right conclusions agree.
But me and Tommy, on Tommy's first episodes, me, Tommy, and Keith all discussed that we thought we had the secret that we did hamstrings before squats. It's like, just to prove your point. It's Meadows' trick that he figured out by accident because all the squat racks were tied up. But, it's funny. Everybody's tried it for some dumbass reason. and it works so well, people keep it.
Well, no, that actually works great, and you got to consider the fact that when you train a muscle, the antagonist actually gets potentiated as well. So the fact that you're training your hamstrings, your quads are activating, but they're not getting exhausted. So they're primed and ready to fire when you squat too.
Right.
I like that.
Yep.
Yeah, because they're working the eccentric. Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. To lower it slow.
All right.
Good to know.
What about now? If we went into contest prep with the growth hormone and stuff, is there any difference in the way that you would have somebody run it?
I like to space the dosing out a little bit more because you get a little spike in fat loss, a little more lipolysis when you dose your GH. So now I like to space it out a little bit more because of that. However, pending the person, I will go higher doses. I like my doses of GH to kind of taper up to support the hardest phase of the diet because GH gives you a little bit of a false fullness and strength support. So when your calories are lowest and you're pushing hardest and you're trying to support all that muscle and make sure it doesn't leave, and you're also trying to support muscular volume as well. So I like to have it highest during my push, and then I'll take it back down. You know that point? You know that point when you're in your diet?
Say that one more time.
The point, you know how you get into your prep and you're kind of working hard, and you're eating clean, you're doing everything, and then you hit that point where you're like, all right, now it's time to really push and get shredded.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point where I like to have GH the highest for muscular support. And it's fat loss. So it does both. And then after I get kind of through that phase, if you're running high dose GH, you got a lot of water retention. It's hard to kind of see where you're at. And an untrained eye really has a hard time seeing what's fat and what's water. And if you're not seeing somebody in person, it's hard to differentiate that.
Right.
Because I explain to people when you have fat, you can't really see the muscle flexing underneath the skin. But if you're holding water, everything will be blurry and it'll look like fat, but you'll still be able to see the muscle fibers flicker and everything. And that's how you're able to differentiate.
Right.
But if you don't see the person in person and they don't have a high definition video, you can't tell the difference. So it's hard to get a clear look at them when GH is still high. So I like to pull it down in order to get a clearer look at that point. And also, most of the work is done. We don't need the support anymore. So I start to pull that down. And one of the final factors to that is, again, when we talked about peaking, a lot of people always like to blame when they don't get ready, when they don't peak for a show. They'll blame their carb load, they'll blame their diuretics, they'll blame their water. And, we all hear stories. People, I had to eat 3,000 grams of carbs to fill out, right?
Yeah.
Well, why did you have to eat 3,000 grams of carbs? Probably because your sensitivity's fucked from abusing GH.
Right.
So if you pull the GH down and allow your sensitivity to restore, then you can load a lot easier for your show, and you don't have to eat as much.
Right.
When do you normally pull the GH out? Like 10 days out before the show?
It depends on the person, depends how dry they are, depends on how they're looking. Some people can get dry on fucking 6 and 8 IUs. Other people fucking hold water from 4.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you're dry and I can keep your GH in, fuck yeah, I'm going to keep the fullness and go into the show with it.
Sure.
But if I feel like it's skewing your sensitivity and blurring your physique, I'm going to take it down 2 IUs at a time until you look dry. And if you're not dry at 2, I'm going to take it down to 0.
Sure.
Okay.
It's all situationally dependent on each individual person.
So there's no magic timetable on that, like 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out. It's basically we're just going to taper it down until you look dry, and then I'll just leave it alone.
I start tapering at 4 weeks anyway.
Okay.
Just to see how they look.
Just to make sure.
And, and I hit the point where we can hold it, where they look like they can peak for stage without an issue, and then I stay there. And if it's not good enough, I'll go lower. And then if that's not good enough, I'll take it out.
Take it out completely, yeah.
But I find that no matter how lean you are, you're going to have sensitivity issues with high-dose GH. And when I say high-dose, I mean 8+.
8+, right. Okay.
This other thing I was going to say is I thought that you don't even hit the insulin sensitivity issue until you hit a 10 unit a day mark.
You're going to start feeling that at 6.
At 6. See, I never went higher than 5 because I usually can't feel my fingertips if I go higher than 5. And that's with generic shit. That's just with generic.
Well, you got to remember with the generics, there's a strong theory that they're adding ADH to that, which is causing water retention, which will swell your carpal tunnel and make your fingers go numb. Right. So they're copycatting the side effects so that you think it's real.
Okay, so right now I have actual, I think it's farm grade, it's Riptropin, and it looks completely different.
Riptropin's not farm grade.
Oh, it isn't? All right, but it is much stronger than what I'm used to using. And
well, here's the thing. another part of that argument. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No, it's fine.
they say that, people are like, oh, you didn't use the good generics. Motherfucker, I've used every good generic that's ever been released. I used the red top ridpropins at the height of their fucking power, but everybody was fucking crazing about them. I used the Mexi green tops. I've used every good generic GH you can fucking think of. So yeah, I've used those too. It's not the same.
It's not the same thing.
No.
Would you say it's 50%, 33%?
No, I would say it's a different drug that works similarly.
Okay. That makes sense.
It's not the same. I am telling you it's not the same. I promise you it's not the same. And one day our science is going to be able to prove it.
Right.
All right. So
Like
I will save up for real GH then. Right?
actually, you know what's fun? You know what's funny? I just read a quote by I forget exactly which order his name is in. It's Neil Gracie, I think it is, or Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'm not sure exactly. I forget the order of his fucking name all the time. But he's a world-renowned physicist, very, very famous and very, very smart. And he recently said, they're talking about, how the pyramids were built and all these things, and how they think that advanced civilizations visited the Earth years ago, and that's how it was made. And he just said simply, just because you can't figure out how they did it doesn't mean it isn't true.
Right.
So it's the same thing. Just because our science is so young that we can't prove the difference right now definitively doesn't mean that there's not a difference. We just can't prove it yet. And I think in the future we're going to find out that the generics are not the same as pharma grade, and one day we're going to be able to prove it, and everybody who's screaming and yelling generics are the same are going to look like idiots.
Right.
Listen, trial and error for thousands of bodybuilders. We can't all be wrong.
No, that's the thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Gotcha.
We are going to we're going to cut here for commercial real quick, guys, and we're going to come back and we will talk about insulin when we come back. So we will be back with Phil Viz.
Have you ever wished there was a site devoted to providing true information about bodybuilding? One that shows you what the top bodybuilders are really doing? It's all here at musclementor.net. Nutrition, training, supplements, super supplements, contest prep, final week prep, and everything in between. There's training logs, diet logs, scientific articles, and hours of video footage covering every detail involved with building muscle and losing body fat. Brought to you by prep gurus Justin Harris and Brad Hall, all for only $9.99 a month. That's right, musclementor.net. Let's get free.
And we are back. Anabolic U Part 3 with Phil Viz, and we talked about growth hormone in the first part. Now we're going to move on to insulin. So, Phil, let's talk about insulin. Let's go with off-season insulin use and any specific protocols that you say are just a must to run with insulin, and how much insulin are we actually using?
Honestly, there's no protocols that I have.
Okay.
If you look at 20 of my clients, they all run insulin 20 different ways.
20 different ways.
It's situationally dependent on how you're going to use it and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to deal with. So if am I trying to increase uptake at certain times? Am I trying to, really fill the person out? Is it a refeed? Is it, there's many different ways you can use it. You can even use it for fat loss. So there's a number of different ways that you can use it, but off season, I generally like it to do two different things. To carb load you for the workout.
Yep.
Right? And then obviously for recovery. And, I don't think that you need, massive doses for recovery, more so for loading. And depending on the person, depends on how you can use it. If you have somebody who stays very, very lean, more of an ecto or a meso, and doesn't have body fat issues, you can use it with multiple meals. Whereas if you've got more of an endo, you've got to use lower doses and fewer meals.
Right.
Because you don't want to risk body fat accumulation. So each individual person is going to determine that, as well as their GH dose as well, like we discussed. If they are on a higher dose of GH, they can handle a little bit more insulin and not gain body fat, so we're going to use more. Recently the big thing has been Lantus. People love to use Lantus because they think it's the new magical thing that's going to crack and, listen, the whole thing about Lantus recently is just people that want to believe that there's a reason why they're not big like everybody else, and they're going to finally discover that drug, and all of a sudden they're going to turn pro. They're just hoping and wishing that it just don't have bad genetics, and it is what it is.
Right.
So, I only use Lantus personally with somebody who's like an ecto or very, very close to it, who just holds a low body fat and is not going to accumulate body fat.
Okay.
What's going to happen is, I'm sorry about that. Fucking something fell on me. Eventually.
You're pacing too hard.
No, I'm not pacing at all. I'm actually sitting down. That means I'm not pacing. But,
I thought Tommy said it.
I hit my desk in my office and something fell over.
But I'm not pacing right now either, so.
No, I'm usually pacing, which is why I made myself sit down.
I'm pacing for both of you.
That's a whole lot of meat. You're burning some extra calories right now.
Yeah, sit down.
That's why I'm eating. You know, it's like,
Dude, he eats the entire show. You'll hear him. He's usually got a mouthful of food.
Well, he doesn't chew loud, so that's a good thing. Otherwise, I didn't know he was eating right now.
I'm eating popcorn, air pop popcorn, and I use the spray water and then sea salt on it rather than butter.
You don't use spray butter?
No, fuck spray butter. I use spray water. Because the point of the water is just to make the salt stick to the popcorn.
That's a nice trick. I never thought about that.
Dude, I've got every fat kid hack imaginable. I've got this chocolate chicken dish where you take chicken and shred it up and mix it Hershey's dark cocoa and almond butter and stevia, and you mix it all up and you put it in the fridge. And so, like, if your girlfriend or wife is bitching that she wants ice cream, you're like, here, eat this. And then
It doesn't sound that good.
It sounds disgusting, but they never asked for ice cream again. That's the point.
Honestly, I would just go straight from the real ice cream or the chocolate.
Oh. All right.
Which, by the way, you don't want to use with insulin.
No.
Here I have a perfectly carb-free dish, and you're like, just have the ice cream. No, Phil.
Well, anyway, back to the topic. There's many different ways you could use insulin, and whenever we use insulin, we have to consider the fact that body fat is going to accumulate, at a certain degree, and that's what we want to work against, because as body fat accumulates, sensitivity starts to shift.
Right.
And a lot of times people think that using insulin causes sensitivity issues, and no, it does not, because then every diabetic on earth would be tapering their dose up.
Right.
And the thing that causes insulin resistance and sensitivity to decrease is actually the accumulation of body fat. So if you're very accurate on your diet and your program and you stay lean, you don't ever have to pull insulin out.
Right.
You don't have to cycle it in and out if you're keeping the right body composition.
Right.
But a lot of people don't realize that. They think that the insulin is what causes the sensitivity issues, and it is not. The sensitivity issues come from body fat accumulation and using it, and the bad diet, and using shitty fats. So that's what issues come from.
Let's say we got a typical, let's say Tommy's the ectomesopost child, let's say that. And we've got, let's say Tommy's having 50 carbs a meal, 5 times a day. Not his last meal is no carbs. And Tommy's like, fuck you, Todd, I never eat that many carbs. But let's just pretend he did. How much would he use Lantus because it's long acting, or would he use Humalog 5 times a day to go with that?
I don't like Lantus simply because it's maintenance. There's too much maintenance to it. There's too much restrict. You got to worry that if you don't have food around, blood sugar might come down.
Right.
But I just don't like something in there that requires that type of maintenance. You could just microdose Humalog or Humulin R and get the same type of effect.
Right.
But everybody thinks that Lantus is this fucking magic. And you can do the same exact fucking thing using Humalog and Humulin R the same way.
Sure.
Okay, because it's so low it doesn't matter. You're up and down in a 2-hour period versus. Okay. So let's say you use Humalog. Would he use like 2 units or the full 5 units because he's using 50 carbs? I know that everyone's different, but let's say just a generic human.
Well, here's the thing. A lot of people, like I said, I mentioned when we took a commercial break, that a lot of people think that these drugs are invented so they can get big for bodybuilding, and that's not the case. They're invented for a medical purpose, and we use them for bodybuilding because we found it suits our needs.
Right.
So people usually take their insulin wrong, and I can't tell you how many times I've run into a bodybuilder who takes their insulin before their meal. Yeah, we've all seen that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When does a diabetic take their insulin?
After the food's already in the system.
Why?
Because their blood sugar level has increased at that point. So now they can check their blood sugar.
So they know exactly how much they need, and now it's interacting with the nutrients that are already absorbing, right?
Yep.
So if we take our Humalog, and the onset, people say, is 15 minutes, but anybody who's known a diabetic knows it starts to onset immediately, not 15 minutes. Your blood sugar will start dropping within minutes, not 15 minutes. That's just when it has its peak efficiency. So, your blood sugar is going to start dropping immediately. So if you take your Humalog, how long does it take you to eat a meal?
How long does it take you to eat a meal? 20 to 30 minutes.
Listen, let's say 20 for the sake of argument.
5.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then how long does it take for your stomach acid to break it down and everything really start hitting your bloodstream? Another, 30, 40.
30 minutes.
All right?
Yeah.
By then, the Humalog's potency is out of your system.
Right.
You missed the fucking timing. You missed the window.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So eat your meal first, then take your insulin.
Then take your insulin.
Okay.
No, everybody fucks that one up. Most people fuck that one up. But another thing that they don't consider is, even if you're eating a high-protein meal, what happens? You get an insulin response, don't you?
Yep.
Yep.
So you get an insulin response, and then you don't have to take so much exogenous insulin because it's going to compound with your initial insulin that you released, right?
Correct.
So you're going to get an insulin release from the food that you ate, and then you just have to take a tiny dose of exogenous insulin to compound with that and get the true effects.
So it's not really 1 unit per 10 grams because we're not
absolutely
diabetics.
Not. Generic.
It's
bullshit.
way less.
That's a generic bullshit number that some fucking meathead wrote years ago.
Because I always thought that was retarded because my pancreas works fantastic. Otherwise, I wouldn't have body fat. So I was like, I should use maybe half of what the dumb meatheads think and usually use like 1 unit per 20 grams of carbs or 1 unit per 15, 20, you know what I'm saying? 25. So 2 units to me is a reasonable dose of Humalog. Anything more than that, it seems to be counterproductive because then you got to chase that low blood sugar with more sugar, which then releases more insulin, and now you've got this chasing steamrolling effect.
Right.
Yes, but you got to also consider genetics. Everybody's got a different tolerance and usage for carbohydrates, right? If you have an endomorph and an ectomorph, they don't use carbohydrates the same way, right?
Correct.
No.
So why would you give them the same dose? Why would you give them the same dose of insulin to basically counteract or correspond with the amount of carbohydrates? It doesn't make sense.
No.
No, it doesn't.
No,
an ectomorph would need a lot more insulin. An endomorph would probably never want to use
It
insulin.
wouldn't need it at all.
Exactly. So you would have two different people trying to follow the 10 IU carb rule, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So Phil,
So,
I'm an ecto taking 8 IUs of Humalog pre-workout with about, I'd call it 180 grams of carbs. Is that anywhere?
It's situated, like I said, it's situationally dependent. I have had clients where I, had 10 grams of carbs per IU of insulin, and they still go hypo.
Okay.
So it's not enough. The insulin is actually too much for that amount of carbs.
Right.
Where I'll have other people who can fucking do 5 grams of carbs per IU of insulin, and they never go hypo.
Right.
Okay.
So it's going to be situationally dependent every time. And these idiots will post protocols online, and people try to follow it. Well, guess what? Nobody's the fucking same, and everybody's trying to follow the same protocol. It doesn't work. That's why
I get angry about the same thing. I get bitchy about the same thing, especially when they're like, I want a 16-week cycle. I'm like, can you see the future? Where's your crystal ball? How do you know that?
Exactly.
How do you know you're not going to need like an axle for your car? How do you know your girlfriend's not going to leave you because you're a dick because you're on trend? Like, you don't know what you're going to make 16 weeks. So let's just deal with today.
Listen, doses work the same. AIs work the same. Not everybody's going to use the same amount of AI per dose of test and going to have the same, blood readings.
Right.
Ingestion. Everybody's different. So you can't put these generic rules in place and write up cycles and just templates of usage for different drugs because you don't know how that person's individual body is going to respond to it. And then you don't know their unique situation. Do they work manual labor? Do they have a sedentary job?
Right.
Is this person 80? Is this person 180? If you have a certain amount of muscle mass accumulated on top, combined with your genetic body type, you're going to have a different metabolism. You're going to have different response with everything. Uptake of drugs, everything under the sun you could possibly think of is going to vary. And that's why you can't put together these generic rules and templates and usage because it's going to differ from person to person. You need somebody who's experienced enough to read your response to that and make sure it fits you.
Right.
That's why anytime I write an initial program for somebody, I have a screening questionnaire that we go through, and usually I get a good read on what's going on, and I can get close. But I always tell them we're establishing baseline first. We're figuring out what your body does before we make changes.
Right.
Right.
That way I know what changes to make. There has to be an educated decision, not a random guessing decision.
Right.
You know?
I'm always like, let me see how you lift, and let me see how you eat. And if you can stick to any rules at all for 3 weeks before you start taking drugs.
Yeah,
because if you can't get good grades, you don't get drugs.
Yeah.
It's like how your parents should have raised you.
Exactly. So we've got to figure out how your body works before we decide what to do with it. You know?
I just had that conversation with someone. Why worry about what year you're going to take? You train like a pussy.
I was going to say that too, but I decided I'm going to start being nicer. But no, it's not necessary.
No.
And yeah, you have to learn. You have to learn who it is that you're dealing with and what's going on. And I even put safeguards into programs based on a read I get on a person. So I'm not gonna disclose all those because then my clients are gonna know what know who I trust.
Right.
But there's safeguards. If I think somebody's gonna cheat on their diet, well, guess what? I do something a little bit different with the drugs to compensate for where I think you're gonna fuck up.
Yep.
Right.
And if I think you don't train so hard, then I'm gonna put safeguards in. Listen, one of my tricks I like to use to teach people to train harder is I use things that make them blindingly mad. What happens when you're mad? You fucking train your ass off, don't you?
Right.
Oh, 100%.
So if I need that type of habit to come about, and I need you to train a little bit harder and a little more aggressive, well, I use things that are going to piss you the fuck off, and you're going to go to the gym mad as shit, and then train harder.
Right.
Or like one of you said, I forget who said it. We're talking about your friend that passed, and I'm sorry. Again, my condolences there. That was your coach. You said he drove you to work harder. Well, I will require videos if I think they're not training hard. Yeah, and I'll be very, very harsh.
I do that. I do the same thing. I every now and again I'll just pop in on somebody. I'll be like, hey, I need a video of your last set of squats. Send it to me. The next leg day, I want to see it. I just want to make sure that you're fucking training hard.
I actually just trained a client, I think it was either yesterday or the day before, I forget which day it was. And, the first time I train somebody, usually it's not a technical lesson. I give people a lesson in intensity. And I usually will ask them, what do you think you can do with a specific weight, right? And then I'll push them through the set, and I'll show them that they're capable of much more. And I'll take that as far as I need to. If you're holding weight in the squat rack and you got to walk it in and rack it before I say, I'll hold you there. And I'll tell you, listen, this weight's going to crush you or you're going to do the rep.
Right.
And usually almost every single time they perform better than what they thought they could.
Right.
And then I'll look them dead in the eye and say, what does this tell you? And they'll say, well, it means I can do more. And I'll say, no, it means you were being a bitch before.
Right. This is the right way.
Gun to the head mentality.
Yeah, so I'll be honest. I'll fucking drill you. I'm going to show you that you didn't try as hard as you could, and you didn't tolerate as much pain as you could, and you didn't put as much effort. And I'm going to make you feel bad about it, because guess what? That's gonna have a stress stimulus on your memory, and you're going to remember that always.
Right.
And you're never going to accept less.
I always would tell a girl when I was training them, I'm like, every time you finish a set that's not to failure, God kills a puppy.
Yeah, but you know what? They're gonna laugh about that, and I don't like to make a joke about it. I'm mean as fuck about it. I want you to be ashamed of everything that you've ever done before this. And every time you're in the middle of a set, thinking about putting it down when you might have one more rep, I want you to be ashamed of it.
Yeah.
What's funny is I just watched your video with Nick Billy about positive mindset, and I'm listening to you guys talking about how nice you are. I'm like, fuck, I'm too mean to these people. And then I hear you talking now, and I'm like, actually, it's
positive mindset just means that we bring out the best. It doesn't mean that we're not going to try to bring out the best in people.
Best in people, right.
And if you think about it, think back to when you played sports in high school.
Well, I agree that sometimes to get the best out of somebody, you've got to light a fire under their ass. You got to hold a mirror up and be like, you look at yourself. Do you like what you see? And sometimes you got to hold a mirror up under their nose and like, are you fucking even there? Are you dead or what?
You've got to consider this. And a lot of my clients will say the same thing. They'll always say, like, if somebody cheats on their diet or he does something wrong, they're like, God, that would fucking suck to have to tell Phil that. You know why? Because I'm not going to respond nicely. I'm not going to tell you it's okay.
Right.
If you cheated on your diet, I'm not going to drop you, but I'm going to say to you, Well, you just may not want to win. You're going to lose because somebody who does want it is not going to do that.
Right.
You know? So if you're too weak to do this, why don't you just stop now?
Yep.
I've ran into that with some MMA guys. It's just kind of like, good thing you're not doing bodybuilding because you sure as fuck couldn't. And then, like, it's like, God, are you fucking lazy? You train for like 1 hour, 3 days a week, and you don't do anything else except for live in your mom's basement. It's like, wow. It's like, you don't even eat your fucking food. You're bitching about this. You're bitching about that. Your pussy hurts too bad to lift any weights because of rolling. It's like, I can't believe. Imagine if you switched sports that didn't involve hitting people in the face and had to actually lift weights. You'd be fucking miserable. It's a good thing you chose that sport. And then it's like, they all quit. None of them actually want to work hard enough or even stick to a plan at all. Like, they do not want to eat food that isn't approved as non-GMO chocolate. You know,
this goes back to why you said that your old coach made you guys so good. It's accountability. I can't even remember the amount of times a client has said to me, they've sent me a good set or got a PR out, and it's always the same thing. They just say this. I just imagine you standing there, and if I put this fucking weight down or I didn't go for it or I didn't get it, what you would have said. And it's the way that I conduct business. It's the way I coach. I have very high accountability. People are afraid to disappoint me, and that's a good thing. And, they know. And listen, I lead by example. There's videos all over the fucking internet of me killing myself and doing the absolute worst thing you could possibly think of to do to yourself and enduring it. So I'm not telling you to do something I didn't do.
Right. Right.
And you can trust your ass that if you were training with me, it's much worse than what you're intending to do right now. So do it.
Right.
Get it done.
Yep.
And you know what? The reward is to yourself, not to me. You're doing yourself justice by pushing.
Dude, you got me up pacing now. I love this.
Oh,
I'm pacing.
I'm a pretty good motivational speaker too. I'll have you thinking you could run through a brick wall by the end.
Honestly, you sound like Dave Palumbo when you talk.
Is that a good thing or bad?
I love Dave, so that's a good thing.
I'm a big Dave fan.
Fast. If you talk fast, usually people who talk slow are stupid. So usually when someone's talking fast and they're not saying liking, they're actually, their mouth and their brain are moving at the same fast speed. Well, that's always a good sign.
It just means they know what they're talking about.
The problem with me is I seem anxious a lot of times when I talk because my mind moves faster than my mouth does, so I really want to get the thought out. So I talk.
And you're running out of breath because you're talking, you're not breathing. So you sound like you're upset because you're short of breath, but you're short of breath because you're just talking fast.
Do you know how many?
The tone goes up.
You know how many times I've done a podcast or a video and people think I'm coked out, and I've never actually used coke in my whole life.
Well, the dude actually commented on Adderall on Nick's.
Yes,
yeah,
I was just going to say that.
He's just smarter than you.
Reading through the comments.
Don't shit all over Nick's post.
I watched
You're
it.
all friends. Shit here.
I watched it last night, and I was looking down through the comments, and it said something about Phil being on Adderall, and I just started laughing. I'm like, no, he's always like this. This is the way he talks.
You know what? I'm like this because one, I'm intelligent, and I have what you would liken to technology as RAM, random access memory. I have very quick access to my thoughts and memories, so I can spit it out real quick. I don't have to stop and think. And
right.
Two, I'm very passionate about what we do, so I get very excited when I talk.
Right.
So processing speed.
I really want to get these thoughts out, and sometimes I get them out a little too quick, and I don't take my time to think. Like, I don't need time to sit there and think. Like, I can process instantaneously and analyze instantaneously. You can even ask me a question that I don't know the answer to, but because of my base of knowledge, I can analyze and process so fast I can give you an answer if I didn't know the answer.
I have that same problem. it pisses people off. They're like, you're trying to make me feel stupid. It's like, no, this is just you realizing it for the first time.
All right, let's
got way off topic.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll move back onto it now. We talked about off season. Let's go to contest prep, insulin usage. What would be a baseline you would start off with somebody? I mean, obviously, you've worked with a person, assuming you've worked with them for quite a while and you know what they did in the off season. What's a little bit different as far as their pre-contest insulin usage?
I will never start a pre-contest on insulin simply because it's going to support fat accumulation and it's going to actually slow our progress.
Right.
So I will never start with it, but I will implement it. Actually, no, I'm not going to say I'll never start with it because I just lied. I actually did start somebody's process prep with it fucking yesterday.
But it's atypical.
But it's a generic genetic phenom.
It's not. Yeah, it's not something normal. You got a guy who's already lean as fuck, and you're gonna put it in. Right.
So again, there is no. I just proved that there are no generic rules. There's an exception to every case.
Right.
So typically, I will say I will not start off contest prep with insulin because it's going to slow the process. I will usually insert it midway or towards the end to support fullness when we're really pushing.
When you need it.
Well, pre-workout, pull you out of the hole. Because I never want to have workout performance compromised, because if workout performance is compromised, then you start losing muscle. That's why I fucking hate
Right, because it's anti-catabolic.
I hate people who treat their workout as fat-burning time in contest prep.
Right.
You know, they'll go into the workout with no carbs or fasted or low calories, and I think that's the stupidest thing you could possibly do because you're going to compromise workout performance, you're going to get less work done, you're going to get less stimulation, so you're not going to support the muscle as well. And you're going to get a slowing of the metabolic rate because you didn't get as much work done. You know, I could put in 50 to 100 grams of carbs, lift heavier, support the muscle, you know, support sarcoplasmal hypertrophy, which you can lose very, very quickly if not supported. Not only that, I got more work done now, so I burned more calories in the workout. And because I created more damage, now there's more damage to repair over the next 36 hours. So I'm likely going to burn up every calorie that I added pre-workout anyway, and end up further ahead with muscular support. I'm going to support more muscle. My muscle mass is going to stay intact, which is going to keep my metabolic rate higher as well. So I'm going to keep the body moving in the right direction by supporting my performance. Workout time is not fat-burning time.
Nope. It's muscle building time.
People do it. So what happens is if I have somebody I'm trying to get lean towards the end, you know, and I have them flat, I'm still going to fill them out before the workout, and I'll use insulin sometimes. Sometimes. Depends on the point.
Okay.
I find that I lose muscle. I smell like ammonia. Like I'll wear a knit caps to absorb as much sweat as possible so I can get the best reading. And I will smell like ammonia if I do not use a couple units of insulin before I lift, even if I'm using carbs.
Well, you've also got to consider the fact that you have insulin resistance when you're using high doses of GH. So if you don't supplement with a little bit of insulin with your GH at certain points based on the dose, then you're just not going to uptake anything in the first place.
Right, but technically, since I'm using Riptropin, I'm not using GH. You know?
Well, like I said, listen, hold on there. I said that the generics have insulin-like effects. For all we know, it could be GHRPs, right, which are GH secretagogues, which are increasing GH, so you would have the insulin resistance issues.
Right. Okay.
It's true.
So it still may be causing insulin resistance because it's something similar or that stimulates GH production.
But so I guess where was I going with that? So I mean I've always all right. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I don't know why I'm still talking. Continue.
No worries. I just wanted to put you in the right direction. That's all. But no, insulin use in contest can be very beneficial if it's used correctly. If the person doesn't have the right grasp on how to use it and they're using it randomly, and a lot of times this is just a false security in their own expertise. You know, they look at insulin, they're like, I know how to use it, I know the basics of it, I can do it, and they really can't.
They don't know.
You know,
right?
And they really screw up the process, and they screw up their entire contest prep because they think they know how to use it, and they think it's simple, and it's really not simple.
When you get down, when you insert it during contest prep, it's typically when you've got the carbs lowered, the person is basically in the danger zone where they can start burning up muscle tissue while they train it because their calories are a little bit lower, carbs are a little bit lower.
Absolutely.
That's when you're going to add it.
Also, when I would use it is during refeeds as well. So sometimes I don't even have it in the program, but I'll use it on a refeed day.
So they can uptake all those carbohydrates that they're eating.
Well, insulin is going to make your food more efficient.
Yes.
So if I would need to take in 800 to 1,000 grams of carbs to fill out on a refeed, I could probably get away with 600 with using insulin.
Right. Now, doesn't that increase the amount that go to the fat cells or no? Because you're already in a glycogen depleted state.
Well, you've got to consider your body is always going to do first what's a priority, right? So
it's going to be glycogen.
Think about it this way. when you're driving your car, your muscles are your gas tank, and your body fat is the gas tank in the trunk in case you ever run out of gas.
Right.
Okay, so it's surplus.
If you're low on gas, which one are you going to fill up?
Okay, so glycogen gets loaded first.
Glycogen
and
loads
spilling
first.
over is when it turns into fat.
Again, it depends on your sensitivity,
Right.
which is going to determine your partitioning. Partitioning is where what goes first. So if our sensitivity is high, our partitioning is going to favor muscle.
Right.
Right.
And that's when we're lean. And that's
then also when you're training, which is why we stick to it on the other times.
We're directing blood flow where we want it to go, and that's going to direct where the nutrients are going. Absolutely, yes.
I think the misconception with people with insulin usage is they'll sit there and they think that taking insulin means that they can just eat a lot more carbs, and that's not necessarily the case. It's what it's doing is it's making those carbohydrates. It's making the carbohydrates you eat more efficiently to get in and form as glycogen.
Exactly. That's a major problem I have with people with insulin. Who think, again,
I'm using insulin, so I can eat double the amount of carbs. No, dumbass, you're taking insulin so you don't have to eat double the amount of carbs.
See, that's a big misconception, and again, it's false security in people's own intelligence. They think they're more educated than they are, and they think that things are simpler than they are, and they make bad decisions.
Poor
People
decisions.
constantly they set a template for insulin, and then they're like, all right, how many carbs do I need for the amount of insulin that I'm using? Well, first of all, you're an asshole, and you're using everything wrong, because you should set your nutrition first, and then determine how much insulin is needed to make that food work properly.
Exactly.
And that dose, and the way you use it, and the dose that you're going to use is going to differ person to person. So a lot of times, when I insert insulin into a program, the diet has never changed. I don't give you more carbs because I'm putting insulin in. I just use the right amount of insulin to make what you're doing work better.
Right.
So let's say the person is 2 hours post eating, and they have 110 blood sugar. They shouldn't have more carbs, but do they need insulin to drive those carbs home?
Well, again, it's situationally dependent on how you're responding and how long the time period was as well. I wouldn't think 110 is bad an hour post meal.
Okay, good to know. All right, sweet.
I would think 110 is bad 3 hours post meal.
Okay, so
also dependent on the size of the meal.
Okay, so let's say that they're doing the standard 50-50 bodybuilding diet.
Okay,
and that they just increase.
Well, if you're eating 50 grams of carbs and you're at 110 3 hours post meal, your sensitivity is fucked, and you need to fix that first.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? But again, it's all going to be situationally dependent. And what people also don't realize is that insulin also it's not just a carbohydrate thing; it's also an amino acid thing. So it can actually support and enhance recovery as well. And they're not taking into consideration, usage of amino acids. So, they're not considering those things as well. There's all these factors that people are missing, and they're using insulin and they're not educated, they're not informed enough to be using it right, Well,
because the insulin upregulates the GLUT4 transporter, and the GLUT4 transporter does more than just glucose, it does amino acids as well.
Yeah.
So so you're going to be shuttling in more than just carbohydrates in the muscle cell for glycogen synthesis. You're also providing the muscle the amino acids it needs for the muscle protein effect. I believe insulin activates the AKT pathway of muscle synthesis anyway on its own. And then the IGF-1 stimulates the mTOR and the IGF-1.
Yes, but you're also and those are just some of the factors. You're also considering that again, like we talked about earlier in the episode, that it elevates IGF-BP3 and increases the half-life of the insulin as well.
Right.
Not only that, insulin is also known to lower SHBG, which is going to increase the potency of any test that you're taking.
I did not know about the SHBG insulin connection.
So all of these factors are not being considered and analyzed, and people are still using insulin the wrong ways. And I think that I'm probably known more so. Listen, I'm not going to say I'm not by any means. I'm not saying I'm bad at contest prep because all my guys come in conditioned, but I'm probably more well known for my ability to add muscle to people, and it's because I know how to use all these things correctly, and I'm very, very good with nutrition. I'm very, very good with insulin, and I'm very, very good with training and driving training, training intensity.
Right.
You know, that's what makes me good at putting muscle on people and figuring out people's bodies and getting a read on their body, and a lot of times figure out what's keeping them from growing. You know,
Right.
So that's one of the reasons why I'm able to do that. And there's just so many people that are using insulin wrong ways, you know, or just not structuring their nutrition properly. And a lot of times you got to consider when you're using insulin, nutrition needs to be structured a little bit differently, because you need your caloric deficit periods as well to make sure that sensitivity remains elevated.
Right.
And people don't do that. They're in a 24/7, 365 surplus using insulin and wondering why, you know, their insulin had to go from 6 to 8 to 10 to 12, and then you're using 20 fucking units and nothing's happening.
Right.
You know,
And
so a lot of my guys, you know, you'll see in my off-season programs, almost always across the board, their off days are 0 carbs.
Right. Right, because it just keeps the insulin sensitivity high to begin with. It just
And listen,
naturally
it's not
keeps
going to
it there.
elevate your sensitivity to any significant extent.
No, but it's going to.
I'll take a baby step once a week, you know,
Yeah.
as opposed to none.
No, that's all that's doing is just making it so that when you do have those carbohydrates, they're going to go where they belong to begin with.
Yeah,
You know,
and I also have fasted cardio a lot in off-season programs.
Right.
Anything that
Is that
I can
for that
do
reason?
to
Is
support
that-
sensitivity a little bit.
Is that the main reason for doing the fasted cardio in the off season from time to time? That?
Well, I also use hit cardio in the off season
Okay.
because I like to sustain workout performance. And if your
Right.
cardiovascular system is healthy and strong, then you can train harder and recover better from sets, and that's going to allow you to push your performance better and stimulate more growth, right?
Yeah.
And also, if you hit cardio, gets your heart stronger, then you're training instead of having a 150 heart rate and you're burning muscle, you can have a 120 heart rate and not burn muscle just for the fat while you're training.
Well, that's regarding your anaerobic threshold, which again, yes, it's an issue due to fuel source usage. But also, what you have to consider is hit cardio is going to keep your cholesterol down,
Yep.
which is going to make sure your nutrient delivery and uptake is more efficient, right?
Right.
Right. Now, how do you feel about steady state converting white fibers to red fibers? I would think that HIIT cardio is better for preserving white fibers.
Yes, but to what extent is that going to happen?
Probably very minimal in a trained athlete on gear.
One step back, 2 steps forward. You got to weigh the cost versus benefit ratio of everything. And like, for example, HIIT cardio is going to burn up some calories that you could have used toward muscle growth, right?
Right.
But the benefits that you're going to get from it that are going to support all the other things that you're going to do are going to outweigh the little bit of calories you're going to lose. And it's going to outweigh, and you're going to tax your nervous system a little bit with HIIT cardio, right? But again,
Right, which makes it a little strong.
that little drawback is going to be outweighed by the benefits. So
Correct.
yes, so a lot of things that we do have drawbacks, like insulin stores body fat, right?
Right.
It's going to cause you to accumulate body fat a little bit. But the muscular growth benefits we're going to get are going to outweigh that.
Outweigh it by a mile. Yeah.
You're going to have drawbacks with anything. You take anabolic steroids, you're going to have health side effects, right?
Yep.
If we take AIs, you know, aromasin excluded from this, it's going to affect your cholesterol profile, right? But we're going to support muscle growth. We're going to support mood, right?
Yep.
And we're going to generally be in healthier parameters in a better state to grow muscle. So you're going to have a drawback with anything that we do, but the benefit's going to outweigh the cost.
Right.
And if the cost outweighs the benefit, then we just don't do it.
Right.
So you got to analyze all factors regarding everything that you do. And a lot of times, people just aren't. I guess they just don't have the brain power, or they just don't have the education to be aware of all these variables in the first place.
Well, and I think a lot of times it's just it's either being naive or it's just being lazy to the fact that what they're putting in their body they don't want to know about.
And listen, I'm not trying to insult anybody, and I'm not trying to pump my intelligence, but sometimes people just don't have intellectual capacity to do this. Just like I don't have the fucking height to play basketball in the NBA.
Right.
I wasn't born with it, and it's not going to happen.
Right.
Let me give you an example. So let's say, remember when back in the day when you get a new video game and you try to put it on your computer and your computer's 2 years old and it can't fucking run the program?
Yeah.
It's like, so that's like trying to teach some people.
Listen.
That whatever they got upstairs, it can't process the magnitude of the concept. It's got too many different variables and switches and their brain just doesn't process it. So it runs slow as shit. So instead of having like a 60 frame rate, it's like a 5 frame rate, and you're not hitting anything, no matter how many bullets you fire.
I'm a very big believer in operating within your capabilities.
Right.
And listen, I can play basketball. I can play basketball for fun, but I'm not going to play in the fucking NBA.
Right.
And
Allen Iverson was 5'7". Well, that's what
I also don't have the genetic skill and I guess strength and speed and coordination to do it. You know?
Right.
So it just wasn't happening.
I just think it's a funny example because I'm 5'4", and so whenever I use that example, I'm always waiting for someone to come back with the Allen Iverson thing, and they've never done it. And you're the first person I've ever heard. You're the first person to ever say, like, I'm not going to play in the NBA because I'm not genetically capable. And I'm like, aha! It's like, oh, this is my fucking counterpoint.
You were trigger happy with that one. You couldn't wait for me to stop speaking.
Right. All right.
But listen, there's people that hate people online coaching, when they think that people shouldn't be coaching. And again, I'm a believer in operating within your parameters.
Right.
If you listen, you might not have been a national level person and you might not be super smart, but if you've done 10, 15 shows and somebody's doing their first one, you're probably skilled enough to help them.
You're able to help them.
You know what I'm saying? So listen, we have coaches Is your high school football coach as good as the fucking coach who just fucking coached the NFL champions?
No.
Probably not, but he's good enough to teach high school kids how to play football.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
So, listen, there's coaches that are good enough to help people with regional shows. Mm-hmm. And, they'll go the extra mile that somebody like me might not. Like, they'll go to the show and help you with your fucking putting your number on and your tan and your oil. And I won't do that, so maybe that person's better for you.
Right.
You know?
And that's totally understandable. And that's totally where I've been in both situations before.
And not only that, listen, there's some coaches who may not be as smart, but they're insanely attentive. They'll answer your text in 3 seconds, and that might keep your mind calm and keep you happy and help you get through the prep and do it right. Whereas somebody who might be smarter might not give you any attention, and it just won't work.
Right.
So you need a coach that fits what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're gonna if you graduate to a higher level, well, you might need a higher level coach.
Right.
But you may not need as much hand holding, and you may not need anyone to put your oil on or your number on your.
And if somebody leaves you for a higher level coach, you might just need to understand that you're not that level of a coach. You're not that type of coach. And you know what? You might understand. Listen, I have had people leave me because they say I'm too complicated and I'm too detailed, and they need something simple. They might need something simpler that's less stressful. And because I'm very demanding, and working with me, if you can't handle how demanding I am, might stress you the fuck out. And if you're stressed, you're not getting results no matter what.
You have expectations
I tell people,
you think are reasonable, and then they just don't want to do them.
I tell people, I'm abrasive. I'm not coddling you. I'm not a hand holder. I'm not going to tell you it's okay you had a bad workout or you had a cheat meal. I'm not telling you it's okay. I'm not going to hold your hand and walk you through the process. I'm going to tell you do it or quit.
Right.
So, you know what? I might not be the best person for you. It's just how it works.
I see where you're coming from on a lot of that. I'm usually pretty patient unless they start making excuses.
And listen. You might have somebody that's getting ready for the North Americans, right? And they're going to say, Phil, are you going to be at the North Americans? No, I am not. Well, guess what? They might look for a coach who's going to be there.
Right.
Because having the person there is going to help them be calm and peak for the stage. So that might be better for them to have a coach who's going to be at the show. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
So people don't consider all these things, and they take too many things personal when it might not be you. It might just be your approach that doesn't fit the person.
Right.
Funny story about that is in 2010, I did my second show, the North American, and my coach bailed on me. And so I was there, and guess who did my my last 2-day peak for free? Haney Rambod. It's like every time I would see him in the elevator, he's like, Todd, let me see your abs. And I'd he'd be like, on point. Like, he didn't have to change shit. I had it down. But it was nice to have Haney fucking Rambod there to tell you you're doing it right. Even if it's just like you've been bodybuilding 11 months.
Listen. You know what happens what happened to me in 2016. In 2016, I missed my flight to the USA. But I was lucky enough to catch a standby, and I got there late, but I had panicked and went home and started carb loading, and I was fucking freaking out and looking like dog shit. And when I got on the flight, and I just remember, I was like, all right, I need help here. So I text Matt Porter, who's a very good friend of mine. I'm like, dude, save me, please. So he goes, all right, get off the plane, get to my house. And I got to his house, and, he's shaking his head, and he's very, very confident and calm and gives me directions.
But he lives in Vegas now, or
yeah,
not in Florida?
He lives in Vegas.
Oh, okay.
So he gave me my directive, and I trust him. So, it immediately calmed me. And
right.
I ended up, it was literally the best peak I had ever done. I remember waking up in the morning, and I could feel every muscle, and I was fucking dry as shit, but everything popped. And I'm like, fucking man, am I on? And I text him, and he goes, holy shit. He goes, I have never seen a transformation like that in my life. And he tells me after the fact, because I got to his house and all his clients were there, right? So I stripped down and I posed in front of everybody. He tells me after I left, everybody fucking put their hands on their head. And they're like, God, he's fucked. And listen, Matt monitored me by the hour and made these changes, and I fucking nailed it. But I think part of it was the fact that I believed in him, and it kept me calm.
It was a calming influence. You didn't have the stress. Yep.
Yeah, so that really made a difference, just him keeping me calm and putting me in the right direction. And he'll even tell you to this day, he has never seen somebody morph like that in 2 days. And my body changes drastic, like a motherfucker. Like I can be ready for the stage, and 2 hours later I can look 4 weeks out.
Yeah, well, I've seen pictures firsthand that you've posted, and then 2 hours later you get on stage and it doesn't look like the same thing. I've actually seen that from you.
My stress levels.
Yeah.
And
a lot of cortisol buildup.
Freaks out. I can literally spill and flatten and hold water, like just because of my stress, like you wouldn't believe. And I look like dog shit. And this happens to me during prep too. Like if I have a stressful day, I'll look really bad. And I just got to stay out of the mirror and tell myself it's just today.
It's just
tomorrow is
today.
going to be better. And then I can wake up dry as shit, looking like a total 180 motivated again. And I know that. So if I'm having a bad day,
I'm the same way.
Because I know if I take my shirt off, I'm going to fucking flip.
I'm the same way. I'm the same exact way.
That's why I always wear a hoodie. So if we know that stress affects you so negatively, I guess the key with you would be finding how to have that inner zen, inner peace, yin state to balance your yang.
The funny thing is, I was talking to a few people that know me really well, and we were troubleshooting, and every time that I've nailed my peak, it was either one time I was at a regional where I was so fucking cocky I didn't think I could lose, so I wasn't nervous. And the other times are when I was so distracted that I forgot to worry.
Right.
Like on the way to the USA in 2016, I got in a little argument with my girlfriend, so I kind of forgot to panic because I was arguing with her.
Right.
And then I got backstage, and my boys John Izzy and Andrew Vu were sitting backstage, so we're just laying there chilling, talking, laughing, and I'm not thinking about anything.
Right.
And I ended up nailing it. And every time I fucked my peak up, I'm backstage. It was by myself, just sitting there with my own thoughts in my head.
Because all you can do is sit there and think, because that's all you have to do.
I need somebody backstage with me, or I need to keep my mind busy. Because if I sit there to myself, it fucking tanks every time. So I've even said to some of my clients, they're like, "Are you going to be backstage with me?" I'm like, "No." Like, say for example, they have a really good relationship with their wife. I'd say I'd rather your wife backstage, patting your head and keeping you calm and making you smile.
Right.
Rather than me back there, whatever makes you happy and keeps you calm, that's what you need to do. Not sit backstage and think about the stage.
Right.
But wouldn't it be cool if we found some different subject or some box you could open inside your head and climb inside that, and that's your peace zone? Just like we can go into a war zone when we go into the weights, where we can unlock the beast and let it's out of its cage.
I'm not going to name names because I don't like to give away people's names and protocols and what they do. But a good friend of mine who is a very, very, very well respected, like when they have somebody who's really a thinker who really likes to worry, because I've talked to a lot of coaches that I respect and know that my friends, and we have all come to the conclusion that our smarter clients who like to think are always our harder peaks, and our dumber clients are easy because they don't think about what could
Don't think
possibly
about
go wrong.
anything. Yeah.
Right.
You guys agree?
Yeah, they don't think about anything.
Yeah.
They don't think about it.
Nope.
So
I say
one of
don't
my-
come up
one
with
of
a
my-
bunch of imaginary scenarios that might happen that would
Yeah.
suck ass.
my-
Just
my-
don't think about it at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of my buddies, who's a very, very well-respected coach, likes to microdose Xanax with his head cases.
Okay.
I
I used to do that.
Like a 0.25 every 6 hours. And seemingly, I haven't tried it with my clients, but he says it works.
I used to do that too, and then one year my girlfriend at Miami Nationals ate all of them. So then so it backfired on me fierce. I fucking panicked. I had Jay Cutler looking at me shaking his head. I had Ronnie Coleman looking at me shaking his head. I had all the judges shaking their head because I was hitting the wrong poses somehow. And it was the best condition I've been in my life. To this day, French Phillips said that was the most shredded an ass has ever been. And it's like I got 5 of my 8 poses, walked off, got disqualified. And I was like, I better not rely on the drugs. I've got to find some design state internally because you never know what kind of hungry hippo is going to eat your drugs, and then you're not going to be able to pull it together because you're going to have a backlash effect from all your drugs getting used up. Because like her and my coach smoked all my weed and it took all my.
Well, I know.
So I was like, motherfuck! I brought like $300 worth of drugs down here.
Again, I'm not going to drop names. But a lot of my clients will ask me if they could smoke weed before the show, and I'll tell them, listen, I know 3 pros that I'm friends with that are probably known more for their condition than anything else, and they've all told me they stay baked the week of the show.
I only did one show in my life. In the past 10 years, I think I've done 2 shows when I wasn't high, 2009 and 2017. I was high as fuck every other show.
Honestly, I've seen people who smoke, the week of the show and the morning of the show, do real well.
You're not going to worry about anything, that's for sure.
I don't give a fuck.
I feel like I'm a lot more in tune with my poses.
Listen, I don't suggest getting on stage baked because somebody I prepped for a show back in 2014 got on stage baked and turned the wrong way with the quarter turn. But it sure as hell will keep you calm.
Yeah, of
and anything you can do to keep the person calm up to the show is major because I don't think people put enough, give stress enough credit for ruining people's peaks. They think it's the water, they think it's the carbs. They don't ever think that it's the fact that they just couldn't fucking relax.
All right.
Just gotta have fun.
Well, let's take one more commercial break here, and then we will come back with Phil Viz.
Valhalla Labs at valhalla-labs.com. Created by Dr. Todd Lee himself, champion bodybuilder and biochemist, the best in testosterone support and intra and post-workout nutrition.
And we are back with Anabolic U Part 3 with Phil Viz. And we talked in the first segment about growth hormone. The last segment was about insulin usage. And now we're going to move on to IGF-1 because all 3 of them kind of go together. We did talk a little bit about IGF-1 earlier with the growth hormone and how that kind of gets released by the growth hormone itself and naturally occurring. Phil, let's get into, and Todd too, you're really well versed in the IGF-1. Let's get into the different types of IGF-1, the half-lives, and how they're supposed to be used. So Todd, go ahead.
All right, so IGF-1 overview. To my knowledge, the IGF-1 is produced by the liver. It's usually generated by GH, also by training. That there's a very complicated cascade. We all remember the exons and introns. So basically, there's one gene for MGF and for IGF. And what it is depending on what's decided to be included versus excluded is determined what subsections of that gene is an intron and an extron. So when you make the MGF, it's slightly different than the IGF. MGF versus IGF. MGF is generated during training with basically Dorian principles, set extenders, forced reps, force negatives, drop sets. These excessive trauma to the muscle fibers from extreme loading and taking sets beyond failure causes the MGF to laterally migrate to the satellite cells, and then they donate a nucleus, which then will eventually result in hyperplasia once the IGF-1 shows up and causes hypertrophy of that cell. Once that cell grows big enough, if it has enough nuclei to support it dividing into two cells, it will. So the IGF-1 to grow muscle in this capacity, IGF-1 tends to be a little bit better. So that's what everyone talks about. And so it takes a while, about 30 minutes, for the signal to go from the muscle to the liver back to the muscle. And that's gives you enough time, because if the IGF-1 was present, the MGF-1 doesn't get released. That ties back in with what Phil was saying earlier on how you wouldn't want to do the IGF-1 DES before the GH has had its opportunity to cause the MGF to get released. It's why I wait until after my heavy mass building exercises to introduce the IGF-1 artificially, because I want to get as much of an MGF-1 response as possible, because I don't want to blunt that response. Now, there's basically 2 or 3 synthetic versions of IGF-1. The most popular is LR3. L, because it's long chain at position R, which I think is an arginine in the amino acid sequence. And 3 is because it's 3 in from the N terminal of the chain. So for those of you who don't understand polypeptide structure, it's okay. Just forget it. Just remember LR3 is for long as fuck. All right. And so it's 12-hour half-life rather than a 10-minute or 15-minute half-life. Now, DES is about a 30-minute half-life, also known as 1,3-DES. Now, why would you want the short-acting instead of the long-acting? Because of what Phil and I were discussing at the 2 hours ago in this video, is that when the LR3, if you're in a cold state, is not going to the muscle you're trying to grow. It's going to the spleen, preferential to the intestines, preferential to the heart. If those organs grow, you've got organ distension, along with a plethora of other factors that give the bubble gut effect. I also have a video on bubble gut, in case you want to know all the factors. But this is what people talk about with GH gut. It's actually IGF-1 gut, and it's because your IGF-1 was present for too long, not during the anabolic window when you want it to be present. Phil, do you have anything you'd like to add to that so far?
Well, I'd like you to hold on for a second. My laptop's about to die, and I got to plug the charger in, so hold on.
Okay. That was my chance to breathe. So that pretty much covers most of the ins and outs of it. Me and Phil discussed potential ways of using it earlier. To recap, the natural IGF-1 response would be amplified by using a GH bolus 30 minutes before you lift. And then after whatever heavy sets you're going to do is when you'd introduce the DES. And then you get the response of the IGF-1 and binding protein 3 released from the GH. And then the IGF-1 is introduced, but because you have the binding protein 3 increased, it now extends that half-life from 30 minutes to possibly an hour or so. Also, the interesting about binding proteins is that they're used for shuttling muscles. Basically, it makes sure it chaperones the compound, makes it survive longer in the bloodstream. It also gets it to where it needs to go. It's kind of like an Uber for a protein.
Right.
I'm back. I apologize.
Nope.
That's cool. So I pretty much ran through a brief overview presentation of IGF-1 and the LR3 versus DES pros and cons.
All right. Well, I typically don't like to use IGF simply because I feel like GH does enough of it, as well as the juice and growth response. I honestly just think it's too much of a headache and too much just of a pain in the ass to dose it and do it at different times and such. When the GH does a fine job itself, I'd rather put the money towards GH. And with GH and insulin, we get enough of a response with the IGF, where taking exogenous IGF really isn't going to push it that much higher, I wouldn't think. And plus, you only have so many receptors where they're saturated. And if you're using a good enough dose of GH, they're saturated anyway. Right. And you're just going to get a growth response, like you said, in the spleen and the intestinal tract. So I typically just don't like to use it myself. But if I had to pick, I would choose DES over the IGF LR3 simply because of the points that you stated. But I feel like there's enough synergy with GH and insulin where it's not needed, just in my opinion anyway.
Right.
And okay, so let's revisit the protocol then. Let's say we wanted to maximize IGF-1 response. You would said that 30 minutes prior to lifting, a bolus of up to 4 to 6 units of GH. Yep. Remaining GH should be divided into other time periods. And then the insulin would be introduced when? Right before you lift or during that pump set before we get to our main work set?
I usually
if we're doing pec deck before we do bench press.
Well, I usually use the insulin right before the workout simply because I'm not going to ask somebody to leave the middle of the workout and go inject it after one exercise, although I have done it. I just think it's a pain in the ass to do it, and the cost versus, the pain in the ass of it versus what you're going to get out of it, 5-10 minutes is not going to make that much of a difference.
Right.
And also the fact that it's going to take a little bit of time for it to fully hit your system and elevate and become, realize its true, or reach its true potency. So, you've got a little delay in there anyway. So I just figure you do the insulin right before the workout and you're fine. I usually have to do it with the Rice Krispie treats on the drive over to the gym.
Okay, so that's the next question I was going to say is earlier you had a pretty negative opinion of people who eat the GH and the insulin before the carbs, but you said previously you do the carbs during that first pump exercise. So the caveat is that you actually have solid food, carb full, fatless sub meal before doing the insulin. And then after that is when you have your amino acids, di and tripeptide protein, and highly branched chain cyclodextrin while you're doing your pump.
I like to use the Rice Krispie treats for a few reasons. Simply because, one, I like to space the pre-workout meal far enough away from the workout where the food is not still digesting and it's going to slow the transit of the intra-workout nutrition. That's number one. And
so 2 or 3 hours pre, would you say? 2 or 3 hours?
I would say about 1.5 to 2 hours away from the workout, the pre-workout meal.
Okay.
That way it's mostly digested and it's not going to slow transit. However, I do like to use a little bit of use a little food like Rice Krispie treats, and that's for a few reasons. One, they might be a little hungry. And it might help settle your stomach a little bit. Two, it's a little bit of a snack, so they don't feel like they need to cheat on their diet every day, right?
Right.
3, you're going to get a little bit of a insulin spike and a sugar spike from the food. It's going to put you in a little bit better mood because carbohydrates and sugar are precursors of serotonin, so it's going to put you in a good mindset. And 3, like we talked about earlier with the gastric emptying effect with hydrolyzed proteins and essential amino acids, free form, and fast digesting carbohydrates like HBCD, it's going to prevent that gastric dumping as well because it slows the transit just a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Like a sponge. It's like a sponge, because it's shaped like a sponge and it looks kind of like SpongeBob and screams when you eat it. That when the carbs and the protein mix in with it, it's like a fortified paste, so it gets absorbed slower.
Yeah, it just slows everything down just enough so you don't get any gastric dumping and you don't get any digestive distress and any issues with that, but not too much. And like I said, there's the snack factor. I leave this in pre-workout too, so you get to cheat on your diet every single day, so you don't need to fucking ask me for cheat meals. Because to be perfectly honest, I don't give a fuck if you feel good or not, but I'll help a little bit.
Right.
I found that it's funny that every single thing you said is shit that I've done and never told anybody. Is that I use like jelly beans, or I would use sometimes zingers. But sometimes if I'm really hungry and angry and I want to murder people while I'm driving to the gym, I'm like, I might have a shitty workout and try to rush into my heavy set because I'm so motivated to lift heavy and fuck up my pump unless I have some type of simple carbs first.
It has to be easily digested, and it has to be low body. It has to be low body fat. It has to be low fat. So
right.
If you can go in the cereal bar aisle and find anything that digests pretty quick, that's pretty low fat, you can get away with it. You can replace the Rice Krispie treats. And when I tell my clients this, especially in prep, they usually spend 3 hours in the cereal bar aisle looking at what they want to eat now. as long as
Gummy bears was always my favorite. Gummy bears is about 30-minute absorption time. I've even tested it with the glucometer.
There you go. So anything like that will work in place of all of those things. So it covers multiple bases. So it's okay to do. It's not really going to mess anything up, and you're not getting any type of extreme glycemic load from it anyway. So you're not going to get too much of an insulin response from it, or anything that's going to divert blood flow or fuck with digestion or anything like that. So it's pretty easy to go with. Right. And like I said, if you're a little bit hungry, stomach's a little empty, it helps with that too. So you can typically get away with that. Listen, we're not doing 5, we're doing 2 or 1 or 3 at the most. So
Like you're talking about insulin units, right?
no, I'm talking about the Rice Krispie treats.
Rice Krispie treats. Yeah.
Oh, okay. What are they each? 11?
They're the important part right now. Fuck insulin.
You mean you're not eating an entire box? You're not eating a whole box. Okay. Just because you're using insulin, so you can that means you can eat a whole box.
Listen, if you eat one or two Rice Krispie treats, it's like fucking eating air. You don't feel like you ate anything.
Right.
But you got a little treat, so you're good. You know? But again, like I said, I don't really like the IGF. I really don't use it, and I think it's pretty hilarious that everybody's screaming and yelling and ranting about Increlex because they think they found out the thing that everybody in Kuwait's doing they didn't know about is going to be the next best thing so they can get big.
No,
but they're going to find out real fast that Increlex just fucking drained their pockets and didn't give them much else. And it probably would have been better spending the money on GH.
Right.
Okay. Good.
We're all gonna have differing opinions.
Right. I use IGF DES. I use it without growth hormone, so I use it by itself.
That would work.
And then at like a switch to the growth hormone after the fact. So you start off like 4 weeks of running DES, on a weak body part that you want to bring up. You use that for 4 weeks, and then you switch in your growth hormone. So if you've got you've got weak biceps or triceps, you go in there, you do a couple pumping sets with the IGF every single upper body workout. Kind of like you would do it if you were using SEO, huh?
You're talking about localized effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what you got to consider is a lot of people think that you get a localized effect from injecting it locally, but there's a good possibility that it's just a potentiation effect, neurally activating the muscle because of pain because you injected it.
And it could be.
You could stick a blank insulin pen in there and fucking probably get the same effect if you haven't tried it.
Right. Which is why I do the insulin and the GH sub intramuscular in that body part before is because I want to draw the blood into that tissue.
Right.
Me and Nick actually had a conversation about that once.
I've actually seen better results with painful gear. If you have something that hurts, like a suspension or like a painful or like something that hurts, you can backload an insulin pin, literally like a 1/4 cc, and inject whatever muscle you're going to train or a specific area of the muscle. A lot of people have a hard time feeling their sweep. So I'll literally take an insulin pin with like a 1/4 cc and have them inject their sweep and then wait an hour till the pip kicks in and then go train
That's
less.
hysterical. I do that with Helios.
Yeah, the only
sweep.
the only thing you're gonna fucking feel is your sweep because it's gonna be in pain.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the IGF-1 is prepared in acetic acid, so it's like an acid. It burns.
Yes, exactly.
So I specifically do the sweep because I have a hard time targeting that area. I'm like, if this fucker's on fire, I can feel it.
Exactly.
It's like if you were torturing someone and you're burning their arm, and they're like, "Oh, my arm." It's like, "Hey, at least it's still there."
And you know what's funny about this protocol? When you learn enough about bodybuilding, sometimes you even forget things that you know. And I used to love using this, and I haven't used it recently with anybody, so I probably should. You remind yourself of things that you've forgotten that work.
Right.
And if they're afraid of needles, just have them shoot themselves with a BB gun.
If they're afraid of needles, they can go to another coach.
If they're afraid of needles, they're fucked because they're not going to get very far.
That's why this goes along with what people say to me as far as competing in bodybuilding and like coming off and cruising. And if you're coming to me as a normal person and you just want to live a normal life, yeah, I'll cruise with you. But if you're a bodybuilder, typically they ask me if we're going to cruise, and I'll tell them I will cruise if you request it. And I'll PCT if you request it. But am I just going to insert it without you asking me? No, because you're not paying me to fucking cruise. You're paying me to win. So we're going to keep progressing towards results unless you ask me for a break.
Right.
How many years can you just be blasting without any type of downtime, would you say?
Well, I mean, listen, off season I don't.
These people are asking to cruise while they're free contest?
No, I'm talking about off season. Like they want to cruise and they want a PCT. Now off season, I don't push the drugs hard anyway, but I won't PCT or cruise unless you ask me.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like PCT. What's the point of PCTing if you're going to go back on? Except that I wanted to test my product, so I was guinea pigging myself. That was a different situation.
Fact of the matter is, I don't care who you are. I don't care how long you come off. You're not recovering. You might recover. You might recover to about 400. You're not going to recover to 800. It's not happening. You're done.
Oh, no. I mean,
and you go hard, you're done.
I think the point is that they want to resensitize their receptors so they don't have to blast as hard. Because you build up a tolerance and have to just keep blasting with more and more dosing is the presumption. Well, I get the impression if you feel that it's different if you're rotating compounds.
Well, I always rotate compounds every 4 weeks anyway. But if that were the case, if I see that being the case, then yes, that's one of the rare conditions that I will pull down the doses and chill a little bit.
Right.
And I also might deload a little bit during that point. But, it depends. It depends if I see them stalling. If they're not stalling, there's no reason for me to back it down.
No reason at all. Yeah, they're still progressing.
And I typically don't hit stalls with clients very often because, again, like I said, I send 3 months at a time, not 1 month. And I always have one phase priming for the next. We might be focused on strength this phase. We're focused on volume the next phase. We might train less frequency the next phase. We might be mini dieting. We might be blasting a surplus. We might be doing a GH blast like I discussed. Yep. But I usually take one phase to prime for the next. And they're all sequentially supporting and priming for the next. And there usually isn't very many stalls. We're always accomplishing something. We're either growing and building and body weight is going up, or we're solidifying and recompositioning, or we're working on weak body parts, but I usually don't hit stalls. It's very rare that I stall with a client unless they just have really bad genetics.
Right.
And you gotta make sure that you don't misinterpret bad genetics for a stall. They might not be stalled. They might just not grow very well.
Right.
Now, based on what you said earlier, I did my blood test. My blood sugar, remember how I said, 3 hours later they got 110? Yeah. So I ate 60 grams of carbs when we started, and then I blood sugar tested it. It was 110 a half an hour afterward, and now it's been an hour and a half afterward and down to an 88. So I think my insulin sensitivity is fine. I'm not an anxious person, but you put the fear of me into the
it could also be diabetes. It could also be you pacing, burning that up.
Well, I watch
He's like that all the time.
The 10 talks.
Like I said, you have to address all variables.
Stan Efferding says that you're supposed to walk after each meal.
Well, that helps assimilate everything because when you're moving, you are constantly partitioning.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good thing. You never want to sit. Yep. You never want to sit. You never want to just sit and digest. People fuck that up peaking for shows too. They eat meals and then they sit around, and that doesn't work. You've got to post between your meals the carb load properly for a show.
Yep. It's hard to do with bikini girls because they don't really flex anything when they pose.
Yeah, but you can keep them moving or give them something else to do. Don't read too much into that.
I was just thinking of maybe choosing it.
We all thought about it.
You're all thinking about
Hey, not me. I don't train women, so that has nothing to do with me.
Oh, you were of that opinion. I stopped too. I do like one at a time. One woman and 40 dudes, it's about equal.
You know what it is? Women, in my opinion, take a lot less work. And I honestly, one of the reasons why I didn't help women to begin with when I started doing this is because I'm so detailed. And I found myself, whenever I wrote a female's program, just doing so much less than the male's program, I didn't feel like the price that I charged is worth it. So I just didn't do it. I felt like I was like robbing them, like I was not doing enough to earn what I was charging.
I feel like I've actually had them show up and be like, I don't understand my diet. I want you to read it to me. I'm like, just fucking read it. And they're like, I want you to read it to me. Well, it's like,
another reason I'm very abrasive and mean. I would probably make them cry.
Yeah, you have to be completely different with the female clients as you do with the male clients. I know that firsthand.
Listen, I've had clients like, once in a while, they'll tell me, I'm hungry, I'm too low energy or this or that, during a diet. And I'll be like, all right, go into your kitchen. They go into their kitchen. I'm like, I want you to open up the drawer. And they open up their drawer. I'm like, where do you keep the straws? And they're like, oh, right here. I'm like, okay, take out a straw. And they're like, all right. And I'm like, now suck it the fuck up. Like, I'll annoy them. I'll take them through the whole long process of making them walk into the kitchen and look around and go find a straw and take it out thinking I actually have a point.
Yeah.
And then I just hit them with that, and they're just like, "You got to be fucking kidding me!" Yep, stop being a bitch.
I think we talked about this the last show, Tommy. Tommy, I think we talked about this the last show. We said, you do this diet and you prep for a show. It's your fucking choice. Stop bitching about it. I don't even care how hungry you get. I don't care how tired you are. You chose to do it. Suck it up and fucking do it.
There's a difference between if I think you're telling me you're hungry to let me know, like the diet's working and you're lean and this and
that's
that.
different. Yeah.
I think you're telling me you're hungry because you're trying to hint that you want some food.
Right. No, it's different if you ask him and say, hey, are you hungry between meals, and how far after a meal are you started getting hunger pains?
Listen,
that's different. Then you want to know.
If I have a client that tells me every day how low their energy is and how hungry they are, stop being a bitch. I know you're hungry. I know you're tired.
You're
trying to insinuate you want food. Right. You're not getting it.
You're supposed to be.
You know what? I think I was actually guilty of this last prep because I was, again, I worked with Matt Porter this year, my buddy, he helped me out. And I remember telling him, I'm flat, this and that. And he would always reply, that's great.
That's what we want.
Okay, good. I'm happy. Keep going.
Yeah.
And then, I kind of self-reflected and realized he probably thinks that I'm asking for food.
Right.
And if I adamantly told him I'm flat, I can't feel shit, he'd be like, all right, we can go for a refeed today. But I was just kind of mentioning, my appetite's up, my body heat is up, so I know my metabolism's not stalled because I knew all the right feedback to give him.
Right. You knew what he wanted to know, but.
Well, yeah. So I was just trying to give him the right information, but I guess at one point he felt like I was asking for food. And he was just like, okay, that's great.
That's great.
And then I realized that it seemed like I was asking for food. And I'm just like, fuck. I can't say to him, no, I wasn't asking for food because that makes it look like I really was. So I'm fucked either way. But yeah, no, if I feel like somebody's asking for food, they're not getting it. They're getting it if I think they need it.
You one other thing I want to talk about. You are on World Class Trainers on the on that site with Nick Trigilli, who we had on.
Yes, sir.
It was about a month ago, I think, Todd, we had him on, right when he first started up. And you're one of the moderators on the Bodybuilding with the Pros Facebook page, the group.
Yes, sir.
Talk to us a little bit about that. We've had Nick talk to us. So go ahead and talk about your role with that.
Well, basically the whole reason why we started it, Nick didn't even really intend to get into coaching, really. He was just sick and tired of all the bad vibes and bad intent and hatred in bodybuilding. Because when we came up, we were supportive. We grew up in the same gym together. I talked Nick into his first show. We used to work out together. We were friends before bodybuilding. And, as competitive as we were and as bad as we wanted to beat each other, if I needed a spot, he'd come over and spot me. If I ran out of something, he would give it to me and vice versa,
Right.
We helped each other. There was no bad vibes. We didn't, hate each other. And nowadays, it really seems like the competitors, hate each other. They wish bad on each other.
Because they do.
They really think the person's going to get hurt and not show, and they give each other dirty looks backstage.
Yep.
And it's just so much hatred now in bodybuilding and jealousy that, nobody wants each other to do well and get better. They actually wish bad upon each other,
Do you think that it's the cattiness comes from the influx of female competitors and men's physique guys?
It's social media.
It's okay. So even the male bodybuilders, the real bodybuilders, do the same shit.
Yeah, it's envy. They're all envy.
I've never. I don't really see it because I kind of avoid it because every year Facebook becomes more and more weak sauce. It's just whining all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is the main problem. Instagram and Facebook.
If you go on all the forums now,
yep.
all you'll find is bad mouthing other bodybuilders.
Keyboard courage.
I've never used a forum. I was like, if you can't show me your identity, why the fuck would I trust that you're telling the truth?
Exactly. Everybody just tries to tear everybody down rather than step themselves up to that level.
Right.
So we started that to kind of try to, bring back support and positivity and everything and keep everybody, supporting each other and happy. And, listen, you're allowed to defend people's stance. You're allowed to argue with people and disagree. But if you start personally attacking, we're going to delete it or we're going to remove you.
Right.
Just because it's not the vibe that we want. There's other groups on Facebook that that people just they feel like there's just a negative, nasty vibe, and that's why they don't go there.
Right.
And
all right, so I started doing that with my YouTube channel too, and I didn't know if I was supposed to do that, where people are just saying hate speech, and I just delete them and block them.
Listen,
and then Dawson Lloyd said you should never block anyone, blah, blah, blah. It's so bullshit. And I was thinking, there's lots of people who should be blocked. What a strange comment.
listen, there's a difference between disagreeing with somebody does, or maybe if you catch wind that a coach does something that's either scummy or completely wrong. There's a difference between exposing that or just generally just nitpicking on everything somebody does because you don't like them personally or the way they talk. You know, like a lot of people don't like me simply because they think that I'm too outspoken and arrogant. You know, and
you're only arrogant if you're wrong. If you're right, it's not arrogant.
But they'll rip on me and all the minor things that I do simply because they don't like me, not because they disagree with my decisions, but they're gonna take a stance to disagree with my decisions because they don't like me personally, you know? And
it's not even that they don't like you, they're jealous that you're smarter than them.
Well, that happens too.
They're insecure and that they perceive your humility as arrogance because they couldn't imagine being as smart as you, so they think you're just making shit up.
People see
through it.
And you can see that frequently because I was on a debate on Dave Palumbo's show probably about a month and a half ago, and I was on one stance of the debate, right? And then there was people on the other stance of the debate who I don't really want to name or say anything bad about, but you could tell that I made people insecure or uncomfortable because we started the debate and the person immediately attacked me personally, you know? And listen, I didn't say anything bad to them. I didn't say anything about them, and I didn't attack them. So what made them do that? It was their fear of what I was about to say and what I was about to do and what I represented. So they figured they would try to discredit me before I made my argument that they couldn't come back. You know what I'm saying?
People see somebody who's successful.
How can you hate a treasure trove of information? It's just like if you're a treasure trove of information, reach inside and learn.
Yes, but it's also like this. If somebody feels like they can't keep up, they want to defeat that thing from ever coming in. You understand? Because if I come into this field and I start educating everybody and I show everybody how important it is to be educated and I really raise the roof, well, everybody who can't step up to that level is going to fail, right?
Right.
Okay, so
they're trying to prevent me from being successful before I have the ability to raise the roof and make them obsolete.
Okay. I don't know what that feels like, but I can apply it to other areas of my life.
Well, you're an educated medical professional, so I wouldn't what that feels like.
But yeah, like I guess if there's a situation where, like, I'm not going to go into it because then it's revealing an insecurity, but I do have insecurity, so I can see where if someone blows me out of the water and they showed up and I'm going to lose what I have to that person, I'm going to feel territorial and try to defend it by discrediting. I wouldn't do it, but I would feel it, notice it, and stop myself.
Well, you try to discredit that person before they can say anything, because if you discredit them, then anything they say is irrelevant.
Yeah, that makes sense. Exactly. I just watched 5 seasons of House of Cards in 1 week, so I know all about this stuff.
It's honestly, it's a lot of insecurity because the people that are actually really good coaches all support each other. You know,
well, it's insecurity.
There's more than enough clients to go around.
Right.
Well, it's more than enough people who are overweight and don't know what the fuck they're doing. That's for sure.
It's insecurity, but it's also, yeah, it's kind of hard. It's hard to say. It's insecurity with the other person, but it's also envy more than anything. You see somebody who has something that you want, but you don't know how to get it, or you're not willing to do it, or you're just not fucking good enough to do it. So, okay, I'm gonna tear you down at any chance I can and knock you down as many pegs as I can publicly in front of people, so that I don't look so bad next to you.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's all it is. It's more. I think it's more envy than it is insecurity. Even, you know, they may be secure about themselves, but
they have to be insecure. Like jealousy is a manifestation.
Not necessarily, because you can be secure with where you are and know that you can't get to that fucking level and still be jealous.
Okay,
it doesn't necessarily you have to be insecure.
I guess this is splitting hairs. But
I'll
give that some
psychology, which is another one of my favorite topics.
I mean, I can know that I'm this, you know, this level of bodybuilder. Okay, I can know I'm at this level, and I can know that that's probably, you know, about as high as I'm going to go, would maybe be one step above that. But then I can look at fucking Phil Heath, and I can be envious of Phil Heath. And if I want to be a dick, I could try to be one of those internet trolls that tries to tear him down every chance I get, knowing that I will never be Phil Heath. But I'm okay with where I'm at. I'm just envious that I wish I could get to Phil Heath's status.
I don't think envy is the right word, though. I think that's more respect. I think if a healthy person acknowledges someone as better, that's respect. If an unhealthy person sees someone as better, now it's envy.
Well, it's all about this is all about perception, but you also got to consider the fact that you might think that other people perceive him as better than you, which would be insecurity.
Well, he's Mr. Olympia. He's fucking better than me when it comes to bodybuilding. There's no choice, you know. I think with the whole thing, with the camaraderie thing that you're talking about, with having that come back and using your forum and your website as that the problem with everything and where it's kind of changed from Phil, what you talked about and how I started out too. There was that camaraderie. Is I think that social media has fucking ruined it all, because everybody's got a platform that, even if they don't, they shouldn't have one, they can post pictures, and they're posting pictures with their fucking Photoshop pictures and everything else, and they're causing a lot of these problems. So people are just hating on each other again because of the insecurities and the envy and everything else. I think social media has really ruined everything, and that's what's made it.
We took a lot of flack with the group and the website and everything, and the YouTube channel that he started, simply because we're releasing a lot of information that people either didn't want people to know, or that goes against what they were saying. But the problem is, a lot of people have a problem with Nick because of preconceived or premeditated or just pre-existing reasons that they didn't like him to begin with. He can be abrasive, he can be opinionated, and he can he can say things that'll get under your skin, and sometimes he'll do it on purpose just because you're being a dick and he wants to teach you a lesson. Right. But Nick isn't. But you got to understand, Nick is a very smart person, and Nick's got a lot of experience. And also Nick's been a friend of mine for a long time, so he's learned a lot of things from working with people. He's learned a lot of things from just being friends with me and being around me as well. So a lot of the knowledge that I dropped on this episode, he's been exposed to that for 10, 15 years.
He's been around it, right?
So Nick by default is a very educated and experienced person, and he's dropping a lot of knowledge, and people don't like it. Because they feel threatened by it, simply because, one, he's releasing a lot of information, and two, he's already showing that he's capable of doing what they wish they could. Right. Nick's got a lot of clients already, and he's getting a lot of attention, and, a lot of people are following his movement. His YouTube channel grew to 5,000 people in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that.
People are fucking jealous. They're like, hey, I've been trying this for fucking 5 years, and here he is, successful in 1 month.
Yep.
Well, and they're fucking jealous.
He's got a big platform because of who he is. Number one, he's an IFBB pro, so he's got a big platform that he can speak on. He's got a lot of knowledge. People know he's got a lot of knowledge. Whether they want to admit that he has a lot of knowledge, they know he does. So he's going to have that draw. And then, like you said, the factor of he's willing to go out and talk about it. Some of the stuff that some of these guys don't want you to know.
Also consider this. Because Nick is so educated and so motivated with all of this, the clients that he has, which is now a substantial amount of clients, he's going to get good results with them as long as he keeps doing what he's doing. Right. And they're trying to take the rug out from under him before that happens, because then everything bad they said about him is wrong, because he did what he said he was going to do, and he got results. Yep. So now what bad can you say? Nothing. So they're trying to get him now before that happens. Now they even have less of an argument against him.
I've told Nick over and over again that what he's doing is great. So, I mean, I fully support what Nick's got going on.
Not only that what they hate is that people hate Nick. He's entertaining. He's not boring. He's got a personality. Most of these guys don't. Right. And listen, let's face it, he's a tall, good-looking, jack pro white guy that, just has that pretty smile, and, he's marketable, and whatever it is, just... He's got that thing about him that people like, and people don't like that. Well,
they're jealous. Yeah.
Listen, I know for a fact. I'm pretty well known, and people look at me. But if I go somewhere with Nick, nobody's looking at me.
They're looking at Nick.
I'm not there. They're not gonna fucking see me.
What's funny is that you got these three people who nobody likes because they're such abrasive dicks. And we all get along. So it's just, you'd think that if it was really us, we wouldn't get along with each other twice as hard as they don't get along with us.
You know what it is, though? It's security. When you're secure, you don't feel the need to be envious. Right. All of my friends that I'm close with are successful. They all do well with what they do. I brag about my friends. I don't compete with my friends.
Right. You talk them up.
Nick,
proud of them.
Nick won the USA in 2014. I was in that show. I took third. You know what happened? Show was over. We went out and fucking ate and partied and hung out together and had a good time. I was happy for him. We took pictures. You know, it was a good time. I wasn't fucking mad that Nick beat me and he won that I didn't. And, you know, all this fucking envious bullshit and people talking shit and are angry and jealous, you know, just fucking do your thing. You know, it's over. But, you know.
One thing I hate about training girls, man, is that girls will be best friends to their faces and they walk away from each other and they talk shit about it. And it's like, why? Because she beat you 30 minutes ago?
Listen to me. You gotta see my fucking my crew of my good friends. Like, first we have Nick, right? Who's obviously who he is. You know, one of my other friends is one of the top male escorts on the planet. He's so pretty and tall and in good shape. Everybody thinks he's fake and his Instagram's photoshopped. Like, it's ridiculous. My other friend is 6'6", 300 pounds, jacked, good-looking, blue eyes, blonde hair, fucking, you know, can get any girl he wants. And then, you know, my other friend I was always close with is Johnny Castellino, who's a prep coach. Yep. And back before he was tied down and engaged, he was a fucking pretty boy. He could literally walk into a fucking club and point at a girl and be like, "You now," and they would leave with him. You know?
Wow.
You know? These are the guys that I hung out with. This is like insecurity central for somebody like me. But it never bothered me, you know? And a lot of people avoid hanging out with people like that because they're afraid of how it looks on them. You know, it gets them less attention because they're insecure.
Right.
No, you learn from them because they obviously have way more experience with girls than anybody else, so they know everything. So you just learn from their shit, and then you get better.
This bodybuilding industry is just a whole bunch of people that are like it to the hot girl who goes out with her fat friend because it makes her look better.
Yep.
Right. Oh my God, that's the best. And you got to wait for the fat friend to go to the bathroom so you can talk to the hot girl because the fat friend's going to be jealous and block you.
No,
so you got
the hot girl goes out with the fat friend so she looks better.
I know.
So she makes
I know. And what I'm saying is, when they're at the bar, you got to wait till the fat chick goes to the bathroom so you can wipe the tall, good-looking girls alone so you can approach her.
Or you need a solid wingman.
You need a solid wing. I was going to say solid wingman. Talk to the fat friend.
Is you go after the fat chick, and since the hot chick can't stand to be upstage, she'll steal you from the fat chick before the night's over.
Well, that's a good approach.
There you go. Reverse psychology.
Yeah. Dude, it works every time. And then I saw it in Beautiful Mind, and I was like, does that make my mind beautiful? Maybe.
All right.
We're way off topic. Right?
We are way off topic, and it's fine. This is officially the longest podcast we've done.
I think we're safe because every bodybuilder is going to turn the podcast off before it gets to the end where we're bullshitting.
True. I mean,
all my clients are going to listen to this. That's their favorite shit. It's like talking about weird shit like chicks and stuff. Yeah, they love that.
Listen, if you want a real entertaining episode, get Nick back on and have him tell stories.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's coming back on in a couple weeks. He's coming back in a couple weeks to do Anabolic U4. We're going to talk Megadose gear.
Yeah, but you need a story time with Nick.
This is story time. How about we get story time with Nick and Phil sometime in July.
I got some stories, but Nick's got some funny fucking stories.
I'm sure you can support his stories. That makes it funny.
Sit on the line.
We'll do story time with Nick Trigilli.
Masking tape on the floor, boys and girls. You're about to have your souls scorched by Nick Trigilli's stories.
Nick can start dropping stories and start ending some careers.
Yeah, well, he's dropped a couple on some of his videos and stuff where he's like, doesn't want to name names, but he says it, and I'm just like, oh, that would hurt if that name got out. Oh.
I usually just don't give a fuck. I say exactly what I don't like. What are they going to do about it? Nothing.
Oh, you do it all the time.
Anything.
I have to hold you back all the time.
Dude,
especially about certain coaches.
The only people that ever pulled guns on me are ex-girlfriends. Yeah. No guys ever came at me and pulled a gun because I said something.
Were they Latino?
No, but you know what?
That would be a knife, right?
That would be a knife, one. And two, you just don't make them mad in the first place.
Right.
Make sure you're... No.
Oh. All right. Well, Phil, you want to come back on and do a training episode in the future?
We can do that.
That would be a good one. I think we're going to do another training episode coming up. I'm booked all the way through June because I got the show coming up, so I want to make sure that I don't have to think about anything. But after I think on the 13th of June, we have Lena Paternoster is going to come on. And then after that, I think we're open. So anytime at the end of June, July, you want to come on, give me a shout. Let me know. We'll do it then.
Hey, it's always fun.
So,
Dude, it was awesome having you on the show.
I appreciate you guys having me.
shit,
I hope
Phil.
you learned
Thanks.
some shit.
yeah. So guys, with that, this has been 2 hours and 20 minutes. I think it was a good episode. So I appreciate Phil coming on, Tommy, Todd for staying up a little bit later than what we normally do doing these. So for Todd Lee, Tommy Styles, and Phil Viz, I'm Keith Fabbri saying this has been the Weekly Grind Podcast, sponsored by Valhalla Labs at valhalla-labs.com and musclementor.net. And we will see you next week with Delane Hart, IFBB Pro Women's Physique competitor, and Natalie Wolf, IFBB Women's Physique competitor. So we'll see you then. Keep grinding.